Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 161, The Uproar During the Trial. Zen looked around at Saint Vienna and the people from the Zug clan, but continued to speak to Saint Zara. Saint, if someone tries to kill you now, what should you do? Hearing Zen's rhetorical question, Saint Zara replied without hesitation, if someone tries to kill me for no valid reason, I will kill him first. Zen nodded, Saint, you are right. Before someone kills you, you kill him first. Do you know where the sword I used to kill friend came from? I don't know. Saint Zara shook his head. He wasn't there when it happened so he couldn't possibly know. Even Saint Vienna who came in late that day didn't see what happened. Only Zen and Murray knew the truth about what happened that day. I will tell you the truth, Saint. The sword I used to kill friend was his life vitality huge sword. He tried to kill me with that sword, so I grabbed it and stabbed him with his own sword to protect myself. So, with friend trying to kill me that day, should I have just stood there and let him do it? Zen asked in reply persuasively. Doubt flashed on Saint Zara's face. What you said may be a valid reason for your action, but I don't understand what a life vitality huge sword means. Saint Zara, if I may intervene. Friend used the Zug clan's tier 4 cultivation method called the 7 mysterious demon swords. He could transform his life vitality into 7 swords when dealing with an enemy. But this bloke said that he just grabbed friend's huge sword. How could one possibly just grab another one's life vitality avatar? This kid is obviously talking nonsense. Angelo stepped forward and intervened. Grab someone's life vitality avatar? Saint Zara asked. All the saints present that day hadn't heard of such a cultivation method in this world and how another person could grab one's life vitality avatar. Looking at Saint Zara's confused expression, Zen shrugged in disappointment. He couldn't believe that the 10 saints in Cloud Sect were ignorant about everything. They didn't even know about the heavenly ogre fist that came from their own heavenly library in Cloud Sect. Saint Zara, if I may suggest, we should stop this trial now. It is obvious that this bloke is lying. He killed Fren, so he must be put to death. Saint Vienna announced coldly. Zen said calmly, I can't convince you with only words, Saint Vienna. So maybe I can show you instead. Saint Vienna sensed that Zen was sincere with what he said, but he still felt doubtful that Zen could swallow someone else's life vitality. Saint Vienna had never seen or heard of such a cultivation method or ability to swallow someone else's life vitality. The saints heard about the Heavenly Ogre Fist and they were present when the unique copy of Heavenly Ogre Fist was put in the Heavenly Library. However, Heavenly Ogre Fist was rated as a Tier 5 cultivation method and the saints hadn't heard about anyone who had successfully cultivated the method. Up to that day, the saints hadn't seen the Heavenly Ogre Fist or the power of the demonic life energy. The news that Zen could use his life energy to swallow others' life vitality made an uproar in the White Emperor City. That happened in the Imperial Army and made news across the White Emperor City without spreading to anywhere else. Fine, let's see how you can grab others' life vitality, Saint Vienna said. He then turned to Murray and instructed the guy, Murray, release your life vitality avatar. Let's see if this young man can indeed swallow others' life vitality. Murray got anxious when he heard Saint Vienna's instruction. The saint wasn't there when Zen swallowed another one's life vitality. Murray saw Zen's life vitality swallow friend's 7 life vitality huge swords. What was more interesting but frightening at the same time was that Zen turned the 7 huge swords into 1. That was the same sword that resisted Saint Vienna's palms. Why couldn't the saint recall and understand? Murray didn't have the chance to remind the saint discreetly. He obediently nodded at Saint Vienna and pulled out the judge pen. He scribed a word in the air using his life vitality and pushed it towards Zen. Zen watched as the life vitality word flew at him. He raised his arm and the demon life vitality was released between his fingers. The demonic life vitality merged with Murray's word and instantly swallowed it. Zen then waved his hand and the word obediently danced around him. All the saints witnessed it and their eyes widened in disbelief. That bloke was indeed telling the truth. He can actually swallow others' life vitality. What cultivation method did he use? No matter who wins in this round, I will definitely ask him about it. Only the real talented and powerful men knew how to swallow others' life vitality and what it meant to be able to do such a method. On the other hand, Zen had used this method countless times and even defeated the masters of the illuminating soul realm with it. Saint Vianna couldn't believe what he saw. He was uncertain about the huge sword before, but now he remembered that day when Zen controlled a huge sword to kill Fren. He thought that it was only Zen's cultivation method, and had never imagined that Zen had the ability to control and use others' life vitality. Now that you've seen it with your own eyes, do you believe every word I said? Zen asked Saint Vianna. He then clapped his hands and the word made from life vitality gradually vanished. Saint Vianna kept a poker face and sneered, even if you have proven that you can swallow others' life vitality, it doesn't change the fact that you killed someone. Zen shook his head. As I've told you before, Fren tried to kill me. I was left with no choice but to kill him instead. Saint Vianna sneered again. It's only your side of the story. Murray, please shed light to this story. There were not many people present on that day. Aside from Murray and his subordinates, the woman named Vivan and Fren were the only few people present when Zen killed Fren. Vivan couldn't testify against Zen but only hoped him to die soon. So Saint Vianna could only ask Murray to testify with one purpose in mind. Murray chuckled and stepped forward the platform. He bowed to Saint Zara and told him everything he knew about that day. But what he said was different from Zen's version. That day, Zen spoke insolently in the commandment hall, beat me up and left me with injuries. Fren happened to be there and heard me crying out for help. He only did what he had to do and helped me arrest Zen. But we didn't expect that Zen had no mercy at all. Murray lamented and continued, he killed Fren without hesitation. I tried to stop Zen and help my friend, but I was too late. Apparently, Murray was well prepared. He didn't stutter when he was telling the story about how Zen murdered Fren. Before going back to his seat, he looked at Zen and smiled slyly. The other saints walked towards Saint Zara. When all the saints surrounded Saint Zara, he waved his hand and a light curtain made from purple life vitality covered the 6 saints. The saints had a meeting inside the purple light curtain. The light curtain blocked all the sound from inside, so people outside the curtain could not hear anything that the saints were discussing. The talk didn't last long, and Saint Zara finally waved his hand again and the light curtain disappeared. All the saints returned to their seats, and then Saint Zara made a serious announcement. During the major trial today, it has been proven that the disciple of Cloud sect named Zen disrespected the commandment hall by committing a murder in it. It was also proven that he murdered the inner disciple of Cloud sect, Fren, without any valid reasons. Having an abusive nature, he doesn't deserve to live in this world among us. Hearing the verdict, Zen couldn't help but laugh hysterically. You've got to be kidding me. Zen's laughter was so loud that the audience couldn't hear Saint Zara's voice. He was so reckless, arrogant, and weird at the same time. Saint Zara and the people from the Zug clan were thinking that Zen was insane. Saint Zara gritted his teeth and roared, "Shut up." With his outrage, his roar and life vitality mixed, releasing a purple sound wave that dashed toward Zen. When the sound wave hit Zen, his laughter stopped, leaving him with grave injuries. Zen covered his chest and sneered, I believe that Cloud sect has a great reputation. But I can't believe that the saints deal with situations in this manner. I may be inferior to all of you, but I am not as shameless as all of you. You look decent but you can't distinguish right from wrong. If you blabber and offend us again, I will kill you right away. How could a junior speak ill of Saint Zara? This made the saint extremely furious. But Zen continued to laugh. It doesn't matter whether I die now or later. I don't easily get scared of any threats. The demonic life vitality in Zen's body flowed out suddenly and dark purple aura covered his whole body. If Zen could not avoid death today, he might as well give his best to this fight. I will make your wish come true today. Saint Zara pounded the table, and the life vitality all over his body rose immediately. The saint had a limitless strength and power, and if he wanted to kill Zen, there was nothing that the young man could do to escape it. Kill him. Kill that ignorant and arrogant man. He will cause more scourge in the world if he stays alive for one more day. The people from the Zug clan made noise about killing Zen. Even Angelo wanted to beat Zen, but since Saint Zara did the honor, he could sit back and watch Zen die. But before Saint Zara could release his attack, a lazy voice came from outside the commandment hall. Why wasn't I invited to the major trial? Chapter 162. The verdict and the princess. Appearing at the entrance of the commandment hall was a graceful lady who proceeded to stroll in their direction. The lady was Zen's tutor, Aura. There was more color in her face, and Aura seemed more energetic than she had been several days ago, and there was a unique air surrounding her. Although Aura's strength was far inferior to the real power of the saints she faced, there was an intimidating deportment about her. Standing tall and straight, Aura gave the impression of being on a high horse, cutting an imposing figure. Her presence was of a leader who possessed the tools not just to unify the entire country but to rule over it afterward. Only direct descendants to the royal king had a natural authoritative bearing like Aura displayed. After the humiliation Aura endured recently from Saint Vienna, she spent 2 days in seclusion, pondering about many things. It wasn't until her last-minute decision to join the commandment mount today that Aura recognized her obligations and inability to continue avoiding formal functions. It also dawned on Aura that she should pick up her mantle and shoulder the duties she had previously shirked. The thoughts Aura had left her wondering if they'd all forgotten her true identity and name. After all, Aura was the Emperor's eldest daughter. At one time, Aura was once known as the Sky Princess and experienced loving adoration from thousands of citizens, as well as being respected, even worshipped in multiple countries. In the wake of Aura's regal yet high-handed mannerisms, the saints present paled. Well, answer my question, why did the court trial start before my arrival? Who decided to proceed? I expect an explanation, immediately, Zara. Cocking her eyebrow, Aura gave Saint Zara a stern look while calling him by his first name. Being influential and reputable as Saint Zara was, he wasn't used to the treatment and stood there in momentary shock at the fashion he was being spoken to by Aura. His lips formed a slight "oh" before he quickly came to his senses and replied, "The trial was scheduled to begin today at noon. You were not present at noon, and it would have been impossible to wait, not knowing if you planned to show up." Is that so? All right. So then, what was the verdict? Inquired Aura while she gestured with her hand. Instantly, 6 people scurried from somewhere behind her, bowed as they scooted away and within seconds returned with a chair. The extremely delicate, yet exquisitely handcrafted chair stood more than 9 feet high, embedded with agates, emeralds, and a variety of other gems. The entire chair appeared to be crafted from golden silk jade hibiscus, a precious wood. Golden silk jade hibiscus wood was so costly, and it was usually reserved for crafting elements of spiritual weapons, such as hilts of swords or handles for spears. During recent years, there had been such a drastic decline from the golden silk jade hibiscus wood being exploited that the Burning Sky Empire made a public decree banning citizens from cutting, harvesting or keeping any wood found and ordering that it be immediately turned over to the empire. Anyone who defied the law and kept any of the wood secretly would receive a harsh punishment. Going forward, only the Handles Corps would use the golden silk jade hibiscus due to its rarity. In doing so, everyone could see just how valuable golden silk jade hibiscus wood was. Yet, this precious wood was used to make a chair. Furthermore, it wasn't merely pieces of the chair, but the whole chair was carved from the golden silk jade hibiscus, which would have made an enormous amount of handles and hilts for spiritual weapons. The chair was so heavy that even with the 6 men working in unison, it was laborious work. Still, the muscular men bent down, visibly straining to lift the chair and carefully carried the chair to the hall. After they were finished, they silently vanished. Aura turned and climbed the jade emerald-encrusted steps leading up to the chair. After seating herself in the chair, she extended her feet out, resting them on the pedestal of the chair, her slender legs tilting to one side. As Aura turned her attention to the proceedings before her, her expression relaxed as she asked, "Now, Zara, please, tell me, what was the trial's verdict?" When the saints saw Aura's determination, they realized it wouldn't be easy for them to slip today's matter past Aura. There was no choice but to argue their position. Saint Zara explained, "This guy murdered the 3rd son of Zug clan, Fren. In doing so, he violated the rules set by the Cloud sect. Accordingly, he is to make reparations, with his life, for the life he took." Aura nodded thoughtfully before commenting, "Yes, that is true. Saint Zara is right. It's appropriate for someone to pay for murder with their life. However, in this case, if Zen had killed Fren in self-defense, would he still be expected to pay with his life?" "No, of course not," huffed Saint Zara indignantly as he took a deep breath before explaining, "We got to the bottom of things during the trial, and learned on that day of the incident, Zen made rude comments and created a scene at the commandment hall. Those events forced Fren to have to come to Murray's aid to apprehend Zen. Sadly, Fren had no way of knowing that. Saint Zara's explanation was interrupted by Aura, who announced, "I want to know whether or not Zen admitted his guilt to such an allegation." Or, "Are you saying that Zen confessed this himself?" "No, this was what Murray told us. As for Zen, he told us a completely different story," replied Saint Zara. "Okay, then my next question would be, why did you take Murray's side and reject what Zen said?" asked Aura. Her tone had changed from a carefree manner to a stern one as she looked down on Saint Zara fiercely. Between the fire in her eyes and the inflection of her voice, everyone present, especially Saint Zara, knew there was no room for negotiation. Well, that is," stammered Saint Zara, only to be cut off again as he stumbled over his thoughts. "You were only considering that the man who was slain was part of the Zug family, a noble clan, and that Zen isn't a noble citizen, but instead he's a nobody. If Zen had been killed by Friend that day, would you have cared at all?" asked Aura. The disgust she felt was heard in her authoritative pitch. There was an imperial air in her manner, and such a noble air could only have been inherited from her father, the king of all of the eastern region. Although Saint Zara remained silent, it was Saint Vianna, who stood beside him, and in a clear voice spoke, "Your Highness, as the owner of the Commandment Hall, Murray's an upright, scrupulous man and highly respected." When weighed against what Zen said, his words were more credible. "If your Highness were present, I think you would have believed Murray, over a statement from a murderer." Saint Vianna shrewdly defended the decision the court had made earlier. After all, Zen was definitely the murderer. Murray's words were more persuasive. It was impossible for the saints to side with Zen over Murray. Aura stared at Saint Vianna up and down, which embarrassed Saint Zara a little. After a moment of awkward silence, Aura announced, "If that's the case, why didn't you wait for me before starting the court trial? I have evidence that shows Zen's innocence." "You have evidence?" questioned Saint Zara with a surprised look on his face. Saint Vianna laughed as he commented, "Your Highness, you can't be serious. I was present the day that Zen committed this heinous crime. How could there be evidence that I am unaware of? Of course there could be proof that you don't know about. Why would I show you any evidence I have? Just think for a moment, if there were no evidence of Zen's innocence, why would I request a court trial?" asked Aura, looking down from her lofty position. After finishing her rationale, Aura clapped her hands. The men who had brought the chair rushed in from outside the Commandant Hall. Now, what they were carrying was not a chair, but a picture slab. Carefully, the men set the picture slab on the floor beside Aura before once more retreating into the background. Aura gracefully extended her hand, flexing one finger at the picture slab while her remaining fingers remained slightly curled, reminding onlookers of an orchid. It wasn't long before the attention of those present was on the forms gradually coming into focus on the picture slab. Looking around the room, Aura noticed everyone's faces paled at the sight of what was coming into view. No one expected Aura to produce a picture slab with the events of that day recorded on it. Even Zen was shocked. He couldn't believe what had occurred that day reappeared on the picture slab before him. It also made Zen wonder why Master Su would have recorded what unfolded that day on a picture slab. Doubtful as he was earlier that justice would prevail, Zen knew the truth would be exposed, and the saints would have to declare him innocent. As the scene on the picture slab unfolded, it was as though the saints present were slapped in the face, the sting of humility lashing their cheeks like whips. Pictures speak louder than words, so the saying went. "Do you have anything to add, saints?" asked Aura while she slowly stretched her slender legs in the spacious chair, as if she were restraining herself from aggression and opting instead a more relaxed, even bored manner. Saint Zara was at a complete loss for words now, and he shot a resentful glance at Saint Vianna, blaming him for this turn of events. After all, it had been Saint Vianna who told him it would be all right to find Zen guilty and sentence him to death. He had even added that they didn't need to report anything to Aura. In fact, when they made their decision, Aura wasn't even a consideration. They hadn't expected Aura to show up and defend Zen so fiercely at such pivotal moment. Admittedly, they'd forgotten. Aura was the supreme noble princess who was once regarded as the precious pearl of the empire and had the confidence and drive to attain anything she wanted. It was only the incidents that took place in the palace years ago that depressed her and drove her to her decision to hide away, keeping a low profile as a tutor at the Cloud sect later. Today's demonstration though reminded everyone that Aura would always be Aura. Despite having some issues with the Burning Sky Palace, she was the royal princess of the Burning Sky Empire, and no one could deny it. Saint Zara, don't you think you owe me an explanation? Since no one had spoken up, Aura broke the silence and directed her question at Saint Zara, the primary judge of today's trial. As much as Saint Zara inwardly blamed Saint Vianna, it was unrealistic to hope Saint Vianna would step up and shoulder the blame, which left him no option but lower his head as he said, "I am sorry, it was my negligence that led to the rash decision today. I beg your pardon, your Royal Highness. I can certainly forgive you. I wonder though whether or not Zen will forgive you. If I didn't arrive when I did today, he would be dead in the commandment hall by now." "You should ask Zen," commanded Aura coldly. It was clear that Aura intended to force Saint Zara to apologize to Zen. Zen was a mere outer disciple at the Cloud sect. It was utterly beyond anyone's understanding why Aura would require a noble saint to apologize to him. As Aura's words sank in, Saint Zara and all the other saints' faces darkened. Chapter 163, The Mo Family. It was actually unnecessary for Aura to display her ruthlessness, but at least she had turned the tables on her and saved Zen, who was fortunately uninjured. Whatever Aura had done, her sole purpose was to make everyone understand that she hadn't demonstrated her true power yet because she disliked being a show-off, but anyone who dared or even tried to annoy her would undoubtedly be a target for her sharp thorns, no matter who he or she was. "My princess, do you think you have gone a little too far?" Saint Vianna choked out. At this point, he had no choice but to stand out just to say something. After all, this entire thing was on him, even Saint Zara had become his scapegoat. "Am I out of line?" Aura questioned back with a shake of her head. Saint Vianna didn't get to respond as she immediately followed up her answer. "In fact, I haven't asked for too much at all. Because of your wrong judgment, Zen has been nearly put to death. Now, I only require you to say sorry to him. Is that too much? As an old saying goes, a fault confessed is half redressed." "My request doesn't embarrass you that much," she exclaimed. "Although it is advisable for you to put it that way, but look at our identities. Our position is superior to Zen's. Then, how can we?" Saint Vianna tried to explain. However, Aura was not having any of that. Before he could finish his sentence, she abruptly cut him off and said, "Vianna, Zen is a disciple I have chosen in person. Just wait and see his future achievements. He will become very powerful and enjoy a fairly high position. By that time, even all of you will have to look up to him. And so, you don't need to make any excuse for not apologizing to him just because his current identity is inferior to you." Now, she had even claimed that a group of saints would think highly of Zen in the future. It wasn't very easy to become a saint of Cloud sect. These 10 saints had made considerable contributions to Cloud sect's development. Only through nearly a century of hard work had they gained their current power and position. In the eastern region, any of them would be admired by others. However, just now, Aura had even firmly boasted and believed that Zen would be able to far surpass these saints in the future. All others present thought that Aura had been rather overconfident about Zen. Then again, Aura was their princess, so no one dared to retort back at her words even if they wished. After a while, Saint Zara spoke up. Anyway, it was my fault today. Hence, I am supposed to apologize to Zen," he said, and admitted his faults. As soon as he did so, he took a step downwards from the front side of the hall and politely bowed down to Zen. The sight of Saint Zara's bow did not paint a happy expression on other saints' faces. A dark cloud seemed to hover above their heads, as though a downpour threatened to fall out. Although the one who was apologizing to Zen was Saint Zara, all of them felt humiliated as he represented all the 10 saints of Cloud sect. After bowing to Zen, Saint Zara remained silent. Then, he walked straight out of the commandment hall. A few moments later, all other saints followed suit and consecutively walked out. Just then, the members of the Zug family left as well from the side door after casting deep and forlorn looks at Zen. Since Aura was there, it was almost impossible for them to get a hold of Zen and revenge Fren. They would disgrace themselves if they chose to stay in the hall. Soon enough, only Aura and Zen were left in the commandment hall. The entire hall was silent when Zen turned around and looked at Aura, who sat on her throne, a smile etching on his lips. He then walked towards the throne as if he had a purpose. When he got closer to the princess, he clasped his hands together and greeted Aura with a smile, "My princess." The princess in turn leapt down from her throne happily and reached out her hand to playfully knock away Zen's own. "Now, you are even smiling at me. I asked you to take part in the trial for slaying demons. At last, many people came back from the trial, but only you didn't. Now, you have just come back, but troubles came your way as soon as you arrived here. As you see, how troublesome you are," she teased. During the trial for killing the demons suddenly invaded them. Thus, the disciples of Cloud sect went back by big, flying chariot. However, Zen was left behind because he was imprisoned by Yolanda. He had no other choice but to stay in White Emperor City. After those events, he found some clues about the fairy palace when he passed by G County. That took up more of Zen's time and further delayed his return to Cloud sect. Therefore, Zen got back much later than other disciples. Master Su, I am still confused by one thing, Zen suddenly blurted out. After a while, he asked, why is what happened that day presented by the picture slab? In reality, the fact that Aura had recorded everything that had happened the other day was merely a coincidence. Zen hadn't come back from the trial for slaying demons after quite a long period. Although Aura had known from some other people like Cleve that Zen was fine and he was just held back by a master of the Imperial Army. Based on Cleve's descriptions, Aura guessed that the one who had arrested Zen was Yolanda. In return, Aura couldn't do anything except to patiently wait for Zen to come back to Cloud sect. However, many days had passed then, but Zen still wasn't back. Aura couldn't help but worry about his safety, and even wanted to dispatch people to White Emperor City to pry into news about Zen's whereabouts. Just then, when Aura occasionally opened her picture slab, she found out that she finally could track where Zen was. She had fiddled with Zen's disciple card and because of that, Aura had even monitored Zen all his way when he went to Mountain alone last time. Zen wore a disciple card all the time, and Aura was able to track wherever he was with her picture slab as long as he entered the territory of Cloud sect. Therefore, Aura's picture slab documented everything that occurred the other day. After watching the records of the picture slab, Aura discovered that Zen was threatened by Saint Vienna. This discovery made her immediately get in touch with Casper and rush towards the commandment mount together with him. At this very moment, Zen asked her why the picture slab had recorded the events that transpired that day. At this, Aura didn't answer but gave a small chuckle. She was rather unwilling to tell Zen the truth. Today, they have said sorry to you and the matter has come to an end, but the saints have been infuriated. I am not fearful of them, but I am afraid that they would take revenge against you. Aura said. In turn, Zen nodded in understanding. I am very aware of this. Even if it isn't because of this thing, they will definitely refuse to let go of me. But like them, I won't leave them off the hook either, especially Saint Vienna and Saint Adrian. He said. He was certain that he had annoyed the saints today because they were forced to apologize to him in public. When Aura heard Zen's arrogant words, she only sighed heavily. Just now, she had forgotten who Zen was. Deep inside her, she knew that Zen would not show that much hatred if he himself was hurt. However, if anyone dared to hurt any of his close relatives, it was beyond doubt that Zen would make them repay it at much higher costs. However, Zen didn't act so ruthlessly this time. This reflected that Zen was humane. Well, let's save those for the future. Depending on your current strength, you are still unable to confront a master of the illuminating soul realm, let alone these saints. To save your little sister, you have to further enhance your strength. Aura chided once again after a few moments. Zen simply nodded in agreement at her words, and walked out of the commandment hall with Aura. After taking the trial for slaying demons and the journey to the fairy palace, Zen had really improved his strength by a mile and immediately become a nature creature. Outside the imperial capital, a nature creature would almost always occupy a dominant position and be powerful enough to maintain the survival of a small clan. However, a nature creature meant nothing at all inside the burning sky imperial capital in Cloud sect, where many people had reached even much higher levels. Upon his return, Zen decided to set another goal for himself and then concentrated on diligent cultivation. When he had returned to Drizzle Peak as its outer disciple once again, off from the people and a sense of pride washed over him. His amazing feats in the trial for killing demons had been spread and rumored among the outer disciples for quite a long time. Before Zen became an outer disciple of Drizzle Peak, Henry ranked number 1 among all outer disciples. However, in the trial for slaying demons, it turned out that Henry was no match for Zen at all. Zen has slain a demon general. Leonard, the one from the Skytop Peak, has been only capable of breaking even with the demon general in the trial. However, Zen has even put the demon general to death. These words of praise were showered upon Zen. It was even said that the whole Skytop Peak would have been totally defeated if it hadn't been for him. Zen didn't merely kill one demon general. According to the news from the Lady Peak, Zen even slew several demon generals together. These outer disciples murmured to themselves and sighed at Zen's fearsome strength at the same time. They had also sensed and encountered the evil spirit of the demons, but they already found it hard to resist the evil spirit of even just one demon soldier. On the contrary, Zen could even defeat demon generals. He had surely made an idol out of himself among the outer disciples. He had far transcended all of them and even Henry. Thus, a majority of the outer disciples firmly believed that even no inner disciple of Drizzle Peak could beat Zen. Wow, brother, I have news for you. You are famous now. Across the distance, Nori and Sean had spotted Zen. They rushed over to him and enveloped him in a bear hug. After a while, they both stepped aside. Then, Worth immediately wrapped Zen in another bear hug. Soon after having caught up with each other, the four of them walked towards a restaurant. Since Zen had just come back, they naturally wanted to dine together and indulge in a feast of drinking. Both Worth and Sean were very excited. Before Zen's return, they had already heard different rumors about his excursions. At first, they even doubted if Zen had really confronted a demon general. However, Cleve told them in person that it was true, and so, they finally realized that there was nothing impossible for Zen in this world. Although Cleve wasn't in the list of top 5 among inner disciples, he had been strong and valiant enough. With that in mind, it was impossible for Cleve to talk nonsense. The thought of the demon general and his strength still sent shivers up their spines. Even a mere glance from the demon general would frighten them out of their wits, but Zen was capable of even slaying the demon general, and just by himself. Compared with general outer disciples, he was far stronger. Therefore, although they had believed that Zen had succeeded in killing the demon general, deep inside them, they still felt it was a truly incredible feat for Zen to have achieved. While they were eating and talking between plates and plates of delicious food, Zen noticed that Nori looked a little unhappy and uneasy. He cast a worried glance at his friend. Nori, you seem to have something in mind. What's wrong? Zen asked curiously. Nori was from the imperial capital. He usually acted a little mindlessly. This made it seem that nothing could ever displease him. Now he looked kind of sad, so Zen thought that something must have happened. At Zen's curious questioning, Nori's eyes suddenly widened in mild surprise. Ah, it's nothing, Zen, I feel happy to see you come back today. Come on, cheer up, Nori said. He lifted his cup in the air to toast with Zen. The more Nori behaved that way to conceal his true feelings, the more Zen felt that something was off. Instead of lifting his cup up, Zen asked, just tell me frankly if you treat me as your close friend. As soon as the words tumbled out from Zen's mouth, both Worth and Sean slowly shifted their gazes to Nori. At this moment, they had also noticed that Nori behaved a little weirdly. After a short pause, Nori suddenly smiled at them. In fact, it is not a big deal. My family is going to hold a party next month. In fact, our Mo family is also a noble clan, but lags relatively behind among noble clans, he replied. Upon hearing Nori's words, Worth asked, Nori, are you from the Mo family in the northern part of the city? Worth's family ran businesses in almost all areas of the imperial capital, so he clearly knew about almost all of the families in that capital. Hence, he immediately guessed which Nori's family was when Nori told them that his family was also a noble clan. Chapter 164, The Cultivation Places. Nori nodded and said, yes, I am from the Mo clan in the northern part of the city. The Mo clan was not a well-known noble clan, but there was a renowned ancestor in their history and his name was Jack Mo. In his youth, Jack had joined the imperial army and led them to many victories. And because of his extraordinary feats, the Mo clan was given the title of a noble clan at that time. Nevertheless, there was no other influential figure that sprung up from the clan after Jack Mo. Thus, the Mo clan remained at the bottom amongst all the noble clans. If you're a member of a noble clan, why did you still join the initial exam of the Cloud sect? Zen asked. If Nori was indeed a member of a noble clan, he didn't need to join in the initial exam of the Cloud sect. But Zen could clearly remember that Nori did sign up for the exam with him. With a smile, Nori replied, my clan didn't grant me a noble clan certificate, so I needed to sign up for the initial exam like anybody else. Worth interjected, from how I see it, you're in a bad place within your own clan. But, are you upset with the current affairs of your clan? Nori nodded and answered, well, that's true. Though we haven't had any influential clan member for many years, the rest of the clan members are making great efforts to help improve our clan's standing. I heard that my other relatives invited some of their friends they met in the Cloud sect to our clan party. And here I am, doing nothing. But Nori didn't tell them the whole truth. In order to boost the clan's standing, it was not only necessary that the clan had its own strength and influential members, it also required the clan to have many great connections with other noble clans. The connection with other clans was an essential aspect for a noble clan's standing and influence. In fact, it was mostly connections that could get a clan in good standing. Nori didn't want to use his clan's influence to enter the Cloud sect. He wanted to do it on his own, but the Mo clan's big shot members were not impressed, and they ridiculed him for that. Thus, they didn't prepare a noble clan certificate for him. Fortunately, Nori met Zen during the initial exam, and with the latter's help, he passed the exam and became an outer disciple. However, being an outer disciple still didn't give Nori and his family the prestige they were looking for within the Mo clan. The clan party was an opportunity for every Mo clan's member to parade their connections with the noble clans. According to Nori, the young people of his age from their clan had already made friendly relationships with the other noble clans. This made it possible for them to invite them to the Mo clan's party, and even some of the members of the top 7 noble clans were looking forward to attending the said event. On the contrary, Nori didn't make that many acquaintances with the noble clans except for Zen, Sean, and Worth. After listening to Nori's story, Sean, who had been drinking, suddenly laughed and said, "Nori, stop being childish about it. It's not something you should be upset about. Why are you so insensitive? Aren't these two the best? Worth and Zen are more influential than those kids from the prestige noble clans. I bet even in the top 7 clans, there are only a few who could match these gentlemen's influence and credentials." Sean sounded reasonable despite being drunk. Although the Zhang clan was not a noble clan, they had such vast wealth that most noble clans wanted to associate with them. Even the combined small noble clans could not compare to the Zhang clan. They had the power and influence like the top 7 noble clans. And Zen had proven prominent strength. The noble clans might have the most geniuses in their roster, but Sean asserted that none of them could match Zen's skill, strength, and power. And at the rate Zen was improving, it was only a matter of time before he could transcend the notable disciples from the top 7 noble clans. Patting Nori encouragingly on the shoulder, Sean continued, "I have personally recommended the most notable people to you. Why don't you invite them to your clan's party?" Nori stuttered. He hesitated a little. Of course, Nori would like to invite Zen and Worth to his clan's party. He just didn't know how to say it because of his inferiority complex from being constantly turned down. And Sean suddenly encouraging him made him a little embarrassed. Zen and Worth exchanged glances and then looked at Nori with a smile, anticipating for him to say something. After hesitating for a while, Nori solemnly said, "Zen, Worth, it would be my pleasure if you will come with me to my clan's party next month." Zen and Worth both nodded and smiled at Nori. "Hey, what about me? Am I not invited?" Sean said, fooling around with Nori as he patted the latter's shoulder hard. "Of course, how can I forget you?" Nori chuckled. The four had the best night together as they drank their hearts out and did not go back home until late that evening. When Zen was finally back to his place, he began to check his new possessions from his recent adventures. During his trip to the White Emperor City, Zen obtained different new things. Aside from the 2 crystals embedded in his arms, he got a pile of valuable other things. Some of those valuable things were the spiritual weapons from the illuminating Soul Realm Masters that Zen defeated in the Fairy Palace. When they died, their spiritual weapons didn't die with them. These weapons were left scattered on the floor and Zen kept them. Zen even found 4 space rings, and one of which had a spacious inner area than Zen's. Even though the house provided by the Qud sect was big enough for Zen, his new possession could not all fit in his place. He had to deal with them the next morning and arrange them so he could still have some space for himself. On the next few days, aside from further cultivating his strength, he spent most of his time contemplating on the Sun Moon Stars picture. The picture indeed had quite a wonderful effect for cultivators of martial arts. The last time he was at the Fairy Palace, he absorbed a part of the power from the stars during the first contemplation, and now his demonic life vitality contained part of that star power. When he used the star power, Zen was overwhelmed by the energy that it released. "I have only absorbed a little of that star power. I wonder what will happen if I absorb all the powers of the stars, sun, and moon. Will my demonic life vitality be more powerful than ever?" Zen thought ecstatically. But contemplating the picture now, Zen didn't feel that same wonderful feeling he had the first time. And he also noticed that he was having a hard time seeing through the Sun Moon Stars picture at that time. Aside from contemplating the Sun Moon Stars picture, Zen also took the time to consider the means for cultivation. The Cloud sect was called the Holy Land for cultivators because it owned plenty of cultivation handbooks, and its most attractive feature was the excellent and conducive cultivation places it had. Since Zen just became an outer disciple of the Cloud sect, he was not aware of the cultivation places. And he had been busy trying to earn points and even argued with Master Su on how he could earn points faster. Just 2 days after Zen had returned to the Cloud sect, Aura sent someone over to give him a Jade Manual since she knew that Zen wanted to further improve his strength in no time. The Jade Manual had all the information about every cultivation place throughout the Cloud sect. In the manual, Zen had read about the 9-yin Thunder Valley, which was a perfect place where one could use the 9-yin Divine Thunder to refine the body. Another one was about the Freezing Cave. From the name itself, the temperature in place was below the freezing point, which was best to strengthen one's will and purify the heart. The Jade Manual also included the 7-star sword light platform, where swordsmen could master their sword art 10 times faster than any regular cultivation place. Learning about these special cultivation places made Zen excited. He scanned the pages of the Jade Manual when he came across the Great Gravity Road. Reading about it, Zen remembered the road with a strong gravitational pull that they took during the initial exam. If he used the Great Gravity Road for his cultivation, it could speed up the refinement of his physical body. Even if he entered the nature level, body refinement was still important. He would definitely go to the Great Gravity Road for his further cultivation, but it wasn't his priority for now. So, he continued to read through that Jade Manual. When he turned to the next pages, he noticed the Lake of the Magical Fish. According to the manual, one could hone his attack skills by killing countless phantom murlocs in a life-and-death situation under strong water pressure. It was the perfect place for Zen, and he intended to go there for his training. From the flesh refining level to the nature level, Zen figured that there was no better way to improve his strength and power other than going through life and death situations. The fighting experience during those situations was more valuable and important than those gained during daily cultivation. But Zen's excitement was washed off when he read the small annotations at the bottom of the Jade Manual. He got a little disappointed. It turned out that these places for cultivation were not free of charge. And the costs were pretty high. For example, an hour of cultivation at the 7-star sword light platform required 40 points. And the cultivation at the Great Gravity Road cost 60 points per hour. As for the Lake of the Magical Fish, 100 points were needed for an hour of cultivation. These were too expensive for Zen. Zen's points were already far more than that of other outer disciples. If Zen felt his points were not enough for entering these cultivation places, they couldn't afford the costs as well. Even most of the inner disciples didn't have enough points to access the secret places. But Zen could not be discouraged just by the costs of these secret places. He had received various tasks from Aura that earned him points, so he knew where to get the points from for his training. He might find an easy task that could give him a couple of points, but it would surely take a considerable amount of time to earn enough points from easy hands for the cultivation places. It was more likely that he would earn more points by completing a hard task. But a hard task would take him 10 days to a half-month, and the points wouldn't be enough for an hour at any of the cultivation places. One could buy points by exchanging a lot of cubic crystals in the Cloud sect, but only the noble clans could do such a thing. Even if the average disciples had enough cubic crystals, they couldn't just exchange them for points. The Cloud sect was just like a huge company. Every month, the Cloud sect spent a huge amount of money on the salaries of managers and other officers, as well as the monthly allowances and pills of the hundreds of thousands of the Cloud sect disciples. And in order to maintain the expenses, the Cloud sect had to charge high fees for the use of some of its places. In addition, the maintenance of the training sites also required a lot of crystal energy. Chapter 165, The Lake of the Magical Fish. The Lake of the Magical Fish was located on a hill in the south of Cloud sect. Compared to the mountains in the north, this hill was inconspicuous. But the scenery here was surprisingly fascinating. In addition, Cloud sect had built a neat trail to it with 6-foot-wide cyan slabs. Arriving at the hill, Zen saw a guard in brown standing solemnly. After saying hello, Zen began to ask him about the Lake of the Magical Fish. The guard studied Zen, and was confused by the white robe on Zen. White robe disciples at Cloud sect were usually weak with few points. But the Lake of the Magical Fish did set requirements for the refiners who wanted to challenge it. If they were not strong enough to meet those requirements, they would not get benefits from the lake, and might even be hurt inside. I want to refine myself in the lake of the magical fish, Zen told the guard. The guard thought for a moment, and then replied, was it your master who asked you to come here? At Cloud Sect, masters would suggest that their disciples refine themselves at the lake of the magical fish. Zen nodded at the guard, for he indeed learned about these secret refining places from Quora, his master. The guard placed his hand in front of Zen, and said, then, please show me your disciple card. He checked Zen's disciple card. To his surprise, Zen had earned a lot of points. According to his experience, it was impossible for an outer disciple to own so many points unless he bought them with cubic crystals. Since he still wears the outer disciple robe, he can't be a member of any noble clan. Perhaps, he comes from a rich family, the guard thought. Then he spoke to Zen, you can't go in the lake to refine yourself now. Why not? Zen was puzzled, because another disciple is refining himself in it. He has been inside for an hour, and I allowed him 2 hours. Look, the guard pointed to the clock beside him. He entered the lake at 11 a.m., and will come out at 1 p.m. Since only half of the duration has passed, you need to wait for an hour, please. Zen looked at the clock. Both its hour hand and minute hand were at the number 12. As the guard had said, Zen had to wait for an hour. Zen nodded, went to a nearby stone bench, and sat down. He had thought that the disciple in the lake would come out only when his time finished. However, after less than half an hour, Zen saw a man staggering out from the other end of the trail. His clothes were wet, and the man trembled and gasped. His lips were pale, and his eyes seemed blank. The guard immediately ran over to support him. I told you, refiners at the 5th grade of the nature level are not supposed to refine themselves in the lake of the magical fish. Refining is a slow process of accumulating, so even if you insist on entering the lake, you can't stay inside for more than an hour. However, you didn't listen to me, but insisted on 2 hours. Were you looking to torture yourself? He helped the disciple to sit on the stone bench. Only after a long period of rest, did the disciple recover. At the same time, he noticed Zen, and greeted, hey, Zen, you are here too. Zen nodded at him with a smile. Zen had recognized the disciple the moment he saw him. The disciple was Roger Meng, with whom Zen had gotten acquainted when they fought against the Blade Locusts together in the south. Hey, long time no see, Roger. Zen responded with a hold fist salute. Zen owed Roger a favor. When the Zug clan sent people to the south to kill Zen, Roger was one of the people who had saved him. Roger studied Zen for a while before questioning, no outer disciple is allowed to enter the lake of the magical fish. So, you have been promoted to the nature level, haven't you, Zen? Zen nodded and grinned, yes, I have. I reached the level not long ago. Then, it seems that this lake is not proper for you. Roger shook his head while taking out a rubber band to tie his unruly wet hair. The guard nodded in agreement. Though the rules of the lake indicate that all nature-level creatures are allowed to refine themselves in it, I hardly ever advise those below the 2nd grade to enter it. Even if they have broken through to that level, their refining time in the lake is not supposed to be too long. He's right. A brother of mine who ascended to the 1st grade of the nature level expressed eagerness to refine himself in the lake. When he entered it, his strength didn't improve at all. Instead, he was injured as his life vitality was in disorder, echoed Roger. Zen revealed a smile. Thanks for the word of caution, Roger. But I've made up my mind that I must go into the lake of the magical fish to refine myself, no matter what happens. Since Zen was so determined, the guard and Roger knew that they couldn't convince him. Thus, they no longer tried. Well, now that Roger has come out, can I take my turn? Zen asked the guard. The guard nodded, and then inquired, since it's your first time in the lake, how long do you intend on taking? What is the shortest time a person can spend in the lake? Zen asked. Time is divided into units. Each unit is an hour long. You can choose how many units you want. I suggest you take 1 unit. The guard could see that Zen was confident of his strength. But the guard had seen a lot of people leave the lake earlier than estimated, and some of them were at the 7th or 8th grade of the nature level. Taking the level into account, this 1st grade guy was indeed weak, according to the guard's experience. Though the guard understood that levels were not an indication of strength, but it must be accepted that they were related. Okay, I'll take 2 units. Zen stood from the stone bench. 2 units? You mean 2 hours? The guard was shocked. So was Roger. Then the guard smirked as he wondered, good. People's ambition only dies when there's no way out. After this guy enters the lake, he will understand how terrible it is. He detained Zen's disciple card, and let Zen pass. Zen moved forward step by step along the trail that was paved with cyan slabs. After nearly 30 steps, he arrived at the end of the path. Just as he was about to move forward, he heard a gurgling waterfall. Oh, this is magical. Curious, he stepped on the trail once again. When both his feet were on the slabs, the gurgling sound would disappear. However, when Zen set one foot forward, the sound would replay. Interesting. This must be a magic array of sound set by a predecessor of the sect. The second time I took a step forward, what I heard was totally different from the first time. After trying several times to confirm what he had discovered, Zen finally left the trail and kept moving. Arriving at a flat ground, Zen saw a waterfall. It was not high, only about 30 or 40 feet. It was comparatively smaller than the famous waterfalls in the eastern region. But what made it unusual was that a deafening sound was created when the water hit the lake. The noise was as loud as hordes of troops and horses roaring, even shaking the heaven. That was why it could serve as a secret refining place for Cloud Sect. Zen went to the deep pool and reached out to touch the clear water. He suddenly understood why the water made such a loud sound. The lake looked pretty clear, but it felt different. Zen felt as though his fingers were going to be frozen by the low temperature of the water. Hiss. Mobilizing his life vitality, Zen dispelled the cold in his hand. Besides, Zen was startled to discover that the lake water was absurdly heavy when he held some up. It is said that in the very depths of the land of extreme chillness exists a kind of water named heavy water that was about 10 times heavier than ordinary water. Could this be heavy water? In this case, aside from the unnaturally low temperature of the water, there must be heavy pressure under the water. Therefore, it could be imagined that the lake would indeed be challenging for refiners that entered it. Zen, however, didn't hesitate on the bank for a long time. 2 units would cost 200 points or 400 cubic crystals. Time was money. So, Zen prepared himself, took a deep breath, and then jumped into the lake bravely. Chapter 166, The Murloc. The heavy water in the lake was very viscous. Zen jumped into the lake, but almost no water splashed. He sunk slowly after making a ripple on the surface. Soon, Zen found that he descended slowly. When Zen was about 1 meter below the surface of the lake, he realized that he couldn't sink anymore. The buoyancy of the heavy water was astonishing. Adjust your breath and try to sink straight. With this thought, Zen changed posture and lowered his head. He moved his hands and forced his body further into the water. After a warrior entered the organ refining level, his internal organs underwent a qualitative change. He could rest without breathing because the air could operate automatically in the lung. Since Zen had breathed in deeply while on the bank, the air he inhaled could sustain him for a long time. Plump. The heavy water in the lake was viscous, but it was clear. Even though he was 3 meters below the surface, he could see the surroundings clearly. Zen had read about the lake of the magical fish before. It was bottomless. It was said that a master at the Illuminating Soul Realm at Cloud Sect had once dived to the depth of 300 meters, but nobody could reach lower. According to the reports of the disciples that had explored the lake's depths, it could be divided into 10 layers. The first layer extended from the surface to a depth of 30 meters. The second layer continued from 30 meters to 60 meters, and so on. The 10th layer was at the 300-meter mark. Since this was Zen's first time at the Lake of the Magical Fish, he didn't set a goal. However, to refine himself in the lake cost him hundreds of cubic crystals. Since it was expensive, Zen was determined to make good use of the opportunity. I will see how deep I can reach. Zen waved his hands and pushed the heavy water in front of him. Slowly, he descended further into the water. When Zen reached 20 meters, something yellow approached him. Zen studied the creature. The beast had the head of a fish and the body of a human. Magical Murloc. Zen had learned a little about the creatures in the lake before coming to the Lake of the Magical Fish. A large-scaled magic array was set up a long time ago and surrounded the Lake of the Magical Fish. Because it was an old magic array, it was said that it consumed a surprising number of crystals. 30 years ago, someone in Cloud Sect thought this ancient magic array consumed too many crystals and wanted to close this secret cultivating place to save the sect from bearing the expense. Many disciples at Cloud Sect objected to the proposal. As many nature creatures thought they could make tremendous progress when cultivating in the Lake of the Magical Fish. It was indeed true that several nature creatures had broken the bottleneck after refining here. Although the Lake of the Magical Fish was saved, the price to use the lake went up from 25 points to 100 points. In this way, Cloud Sect could afford to continue maintaining the magic array. The yellow magical murloc swam in the heavy water freely. A black spear glimmered in its hands. All murlocs were natural swimmers. They had a layer of thin mucosa on the skin, which allowed them to swim in the water freely. Furthermore, they had gills on their huge fish heads, which let them survive on the bank and absorb oxygen from the water. After the yellow murloc saw Zen, it kicked its back legs like a frog and swam closer to Zen. At the same time, it aimed the black spear in its scaly hands at Zen. Zen moved slowly in the heavy water. He saw the black spear being aimed at him and wanted to dodge, but it was very difficult. Zen moved his hands frantically to avoid the murloc's attack. However, despite his efforts, Zen only descended 2 meters lower. Compared with the flexible murloc who was cutting through the viscose water rapidly, Zen was as slow as a tortoise. The black spear in the murloc's hands sliced through the heavy water and inched closer to Zen. When the spear point was about to stab Zen, he curled up like a boiled shrimp. Zen shrank and avoided the murloc's black spear. After escaping the spear, Zen rolled in the heavy water. Most warriors would hit back while dodging. Zen thought that when he rolled, he would catch the murloc as soon as he stretched his hand. But when he turned and reached toward the murloc, he found nothing was in front of him. That murloc just kicked its legs like a frog's and quickly left Zen's attacking range. Zen smiled bitterly. Had they been fighting on the bank, Zen would have no trouble killing the murloc. But in the heavy water, it was extremely difficult. This was the purpose of refining in the lake of the magical fish. The heavy water pressure and high intensity were used to suppress a warrior when fighting murlocs in the deep water. In the beginning, the warriors probably couldn't adapt. They would move clumsily and slowly or even be injured in the magic array. But when the warriors adapted to the water's pressure and got over the difficulty to move, they would have a qualitative change to exert their strength and experience the battle. Once these warriors left the heavy water and returned to the bank, they would feel relaxed. After the murloc swam ahead for a while, it turned and rushed at Zen again. No, if the battle continues this way, I will be unable to defend against the murloc. Zen considered his options for a long while and wrinkled his brows slightly. As an idea flashed through his mind, Zen snapped his fingers, and his expression changed. The demonic life vitality was released through the finger. With some sparkles, it spread slowly in the heavy water. Zen found that he could not control the demonic life vitality as freely as when he was outside the water. Countless tiny turbulent flows and whirlpools were hidden in the lake. Being influenced by them, the demonic life vitality was pushed and pulled in all directions. Soon, the demonic life vitality was scattered under the current, and it spread out into an irregularly shaped large net. But this huge net couldn't stop the murloc. On the contrary, the murloc shuttled nimbly in the huge net and lifted the black spear as it prepared to rush at Zen again. Chapter 167, Condensing a Fishtail. Zen was not mobile in the heavy water. One reason was the pressure of heavy water, and the other was the irregular turbulence and vortexes. Whenever Zen tried to move, he would not only encounter turbulence, but his movement would cause more disturbance. As a result, the flow of water around him became even more chaotic. The current. Zen focused on the demonic life vitality. Out of Zen's control, the demonic life vitality began to drift with the currents. As it spread, it revealed the turbulence that was invisible to the naked eye. I will either advance or go back if I swim against the current. Perhaps it's better if I follow the current. With this idea in mind, Zen decided to stop moving against the currents and instead followed them exposed by the demonic life vitality. Around Zen, the current carried the demonic life vitality away. There was a sudden rush of water. As the yellow murloc's long spear drew nearer and nearer to him, Zen, without hesitating, moved a little and was pulled into the current. When Zen was sucked into the swift current, he was propelled by the force of the heavy water, and in a flash, he swam 7 or 8 meters. The yellow murloc was very fast, but Zen was dragged away by the current, which helped him avoid the blow. The yellow murloc was familiar with the currents in the lake. When he couldn't hurt Zen, he turned into the current and followed it toward Zen. Murlocs were more flexible in water than Zen. Since the yellow murloc was now in the same current with Zen, he was faster than Zen again. Alas, if he and I both take advantage of the current, the murloc will still swim faster than me. Zen lowered his head and swam straight down. When he looked back, he saw that the yellow murloc was moving twice as fast as he was, and charging at him with the long black spear. In the midst of the turbulence, Zen had no place to hide. Helplessly he watched as the long black spear was thrust at him. At this crucial moment, a vortex suddenly came up behind Zen. It cut off the current behind him and caught the murloc. Once in the vortex, the murloc could only stare helplessly at Zen as it dragged him farther and farther away from his target. Seeing this, Zen sighed. That was a close call. Thanks to the timely vortex. Avoiding this murloc was a sign of Zen's good fortune. However, the underlying problem remained unresolved. To refine in Lake of the Magical Fish necessitated that the master moved freely in the heavy water. Otherwise, even a top master would not be able to display his strong power. Everyone else would have experienced the same issues. I wonder how they overcame this difficulty. With that in mind, Zen regretted not consulting Roger about the problem beforehand. Zen was far behind the nobleman when it came to information. They had a huge network of contacts and were far more informed than Zen. Before coming to the lake, they would have asked others about basic skills and methods to deal with difficulties. Although these noblemen could learn such skills from others, the first person to get into Lake of the Magical Fish was definitely not as fortunate. If the first person to enter the lake could figure out how to deal with such issues, so can I. Thinking of this, Zen slowly released his life vitality again. Then, the demonic life vitality dispersed along with the current, looking like oil floating in the water. At this point, his life vitality didn't play a big role beyond protecting him to a certain extent. When Zen released his life vitality, he noticed a group of small fish swimming nearby. The fish were silver except for a reddish tinge on their heads. They were red daces, which were so common that every family in the eastern region could afford them. The fish swam freely. By contrast, they were more flexible in the water than murlocs. They seemed to be unaffected by the flow of water. For them, moving from one current to another required them to swish their tails. Swish, tails. Looking at the way the red daces moved, Zen had an idea. The swish of a fishtail created thrust, which allowed the fish to move deftly through the water. The yellow murloc used the power that his legs produced to move through the water. However, his speed and agility were not as good as those of the red dace. Zen, on the other hand, moved awkwardly through the water on his hands, feet, and even used his body to propel himself forward. When under attack, Zen was so frantic in his movements that he failed to move forward. Instead, he went backward. He did not have the yellow murloc's frog-like legs, but he could imitate the red dace's tail. Since Zen had broken through to the nature level, it was not hard for him to turn his life vitality into something substantial. While practicing, a refiner could transform life vitality into a useful object simply by thinking about the object he wanted to mimic. After practicing a refinement technique, many refiners often visualized a certain thing according to the methods of their refinement technique. For example, Vale had practiced the Lotus Scriptures, a Tier 4 cultivation method. And, so he visualized a lotus flower. In this way, his life vitality would be condensed into the same shape as the lotus flower, which was real and enchanting. And Hugh, a master in the illuminating soul realm in White Emperor City, had practiced a refinement technique about dragons. Since it was impossible to find a dragon, Hugh visualized the dragon sculpture. Then his life vitality turned into a dragon. However, according to the Immortal in the Fairy Palace, it was not a smart method. It didn't matter what the life vitality would be after visualization. The important thing was whether the life vitality was improved in nature. According to the Sun Moon Stars picture that Zen got from the Fairy Palace, Zen didn't care what his demonic life vitality could be turned into after he contemplated the picture, but he cared for the ascension of his demonic life vitality itself. The longer the time of visualization, the more real the object that transformed from life vitality would be. If the refiner visualized something that was about to mimic for a shorter time, the object would not only be less real, but it would lack form or power. Zen wanted to turn his life vitality into a fishtail. However, he had no reference because the red daces had gone. Zen could only visualize it from memory. Condense. Zen closed his eyes and released the demonic life vitality. Then he immersed himself in a deep fantasy, trying to imagine a fishtail. Under Zen's control, the demonic life vitality gathered quickly and turned into the shape according to Zen's imagination. Soon, Zen opened his eyes and looked behind to see what the tail that he had condensed looked like. But the first glance left him speechless. It didn't look like a fishtail at all. Zen had spent a short while visualizing a fishtail because he just needed to imagine its general shape. As a result, the fishtail was just a black piece, not to mention being lifelike. In addition, the edge of the fishtail was pitted, as if bitten by a puppy. What was more, the tail also had several big holes in the middle. Zen started trying to manipulate the tail. To his disappointment, as the tail moved, the water flowed through its irregular edges and holes. This tail didn't work well. While the wobbling of this crude tail did create a small push, it was insufficient to solve Zen's current problem. Therefore, Zen decided to meditate again. Just then a shoal of red daces appeared on Zen's left and swam toward him. These fish were not afraid of him. They almost enclosed Zen. The red daces were to Zen's left, right, and flanks. Looking at the fish, Zen thought, since visualizing the fishtail from memory didn't work, I might as well use a red dace. Thinking of this, Zen gingerly reached out for the red daces. Fish are extremely sensitive. Luckily Zen didn't release an intent to hurt them. Instead of avoiding Zen's hand, many fish darted past him. Some even touched Zen's skin. Zen saw a chance, suddenly reached forward and grabbed a red dace. The red dace swished its tail and tried to break free from Zen. But how could its struggle compare with Zen's strength? The other red daces scattered when Zen caught one. The dense school soon disappeared, leaving only the one fish in Zen's hand. Zen stared closely at the red dace that he had caught and took the opportunity to meditate again. He emitted the demonic life vitality out of his body, and once again, tried to turn his life vitality into a fishtail. Now that he had a reference in front of him, Zen's visualization naturally went smoothly. In a short while, the demonic life vitality slowly condensed into a fishtail behind Zen. Although this tail was only purple-black, and the appearance was still miserable, it looked much better than the previous one. Zen moved the tail a little and felt a huge push behind him. As the tail swished more frequently, the thrust increased, and Zen moved quickly through the water, just like the red dace. Once accelerated, Zen could move unimpeded through turbulence and vortexes. Zen's face broke into a smile. He quickly adapted to the tail by swimming through the water. After about half an hour of moving through the water at high speed, Zen felt as though his body was quite flexible. Although he still could not swim as fast as the red dace, he was much faster than the murloc. Then he swished the tail faster and dove deeper. Chapter 168. Difficult to believe. The journey of 2 meters downwards beneath the surface of the lake had cost Zen quite a lot of time, but once there, Zen dived deeply and shook the fish tail quickly, and his body swam forwards much like an arrow had been shot through the water. In no time at all, he was approaching the 50-meter mark in terms of depth. As soon as he reached 50 meters, 3 more yellow dots appeared not far away from him. They were mere twinkles but became bigger very quickly. Once he could see them clearly, he narrowed his eyes, 3 murlocs. Even while facing just one murloc in the lake, Zen had been in a difficult position a while ago. He had done nothing but run away passively. So it was surprising to see that on seeing 3 murlocs, he didn't choose to run away. On the contrary, he shook the fish tail attached to his back and rushed towards the trio. The 3 yellow murlocs saw him approach and quickly formed a defense pattern in the shape of a triangle, with 1 in front and 2 at the back. They had black spears in their hands, and the sharp spear points showered the water around them with a cold light. Zen rushed forward, but just as he approached the murloc in front, he suddenly twisted his body, which made the fish tail at his back slap around crazily. With the full propulsive force of the tail behind him, Zen turned around and avoided the spear that the murloc had thrown at him with rather alarming force. At the same time, he turned around once more and gripped the murloc's huge head. Die. Murloc heads were naturally the hardest parts on their bodies, but once Zen had fixed his hands, he could make full use of his peerlessly powerful strength. He tore the fish head with enough strength to split it. After the head was torn, the murloc surely died. In no time, he turned into a ball of colorful light and disappeared in the water. To be clear, the murlocs in the lake of magical fish were holographic projections of the magic array around the lake, and weren't real. The only indigenous species in the area were some red daces. After Zen had killed the first murloc, the other 2 waved their black spears from different positions, trying to spike Zen. But Zen was reacting much more quickly than them. The only problem was that earlier, he wasn't used to this water. But now, he had mastered how to swim in the heavy water, and it was no problem for him to dodge 2 simple spears. As he tore the head of the first murloc, the tail at the back of his body waved around, and he floated upward rapidly. The resultant change in position afforded him the ability to avoid the spears at the same time as going on the offensive. Suddenly, he spun a complete 180 degrees in the water, turned his head down, and stretched out his hand to grasp the 2 spears before the 2 murlocs took them back. Grabbing them hard, he pushed back with all his resolve, and in an instant, the sharp spear ends had cut through the murloc shells. Although Zen couldn't hear any sound around him in the water, he clearly saw that the two murlocs spread some colorful lights and then disappeared right in front of him. Outside the lake of the magical fish, Roger and the guard were sitting on a stone bench and waiting quietly for Zen to leave the lake. Roger had originally planned something else for the day, but once he saw Zen entering inside, he had postponed his engagement. When in Dragon Fort in the south, Zen had shown astonishing strength. At that time, he hadn't entered the nature level or become a nature creature, but the strength he had shown was enough to impress Roger. Now they had been apart for many days, and Roger wanted to see what level Zen had been promoted to. This bloke didn't listen to my advice. The lake of the magical fish is a magic array, but even so, the pressure underwater is high since we use heavy water. If he can't control himself properly, he will get injured. The guard shook his head and stared at an array plate sitting beside him at the stone bench. There were many kinds of arrays, such as magic array, killing array, maze array, impasse array, and so on. Each kind of array had a different purpose. For example, the magic array was set to cultivate and test. It was the most convenient one for the cause and had the best results. All the magic arrays had a common point, and there was an array plate to control and monitor the operation of the huge array. For example, when Zen had taken the blooded test on Bloody Mountain, Joshua was in control of the magic array used to release the ogre which had chased Zen. The magic array plate beside the guard had the same effect. It could not only control the magical murlocs in it but also monitor where the human in the magic array was. Gee, Zen has met the first murloc, and it is chasing him now, the steward stared at the array plate and said. Roger also moved close and looked at the array plate. It showed that a little yellow dot was approaching Zen quickly. Roger had just climbed up from the lake of the magical fish and was clear that the murlocs in the lake were hard to deal with. When he had been here for the first time, he had received the family elder's directions and experience about how to resist those murlocs. And he had taken a water-avoiding pill. The pill was supposed to make a small life vitality film around the body. After Roger had taken it, he was able to upgrade his moving speed in the water by almost 50%. Even after being so well prepared, he had been at a disadvantage when he had met the first murloc. After dodging several times, he had been spiked by the murloc and then forcefully sent by the magic array out of the water. Zen is not a disciple from a noble clan. He seems not to know well about the lake of the magical fish. It is a rash decision to venture downwards so early. I think he will probably be killed by the murloc and sent to the water surface. Even if Roger tried his best to overestimate Zen, he didn't believe that Zen could avoid the murloc's attack as soon as he entered the lake. Zen was a genius, but mere genius wasn't equal to anything. But boy, soon after the small yellow dot had approached Zen, it slid off. This bloke is lucky. The first attack of the murloc didn't hurt him, the steward laughed. He had been a steward of the lake for many years and had seen all kinds of situations. Roger also nodded. I agree that he was lucky, but he must be in a flurry now. I think it will be difficult for him to avoid it once again. As soon as Roger finished speaking, they saw the small yellow dot rushing towards Zen again, and again they saw him avoiding the attack. Then it showed on the array plate that Zen had started moving rapidly, with the small yellow dot giving chase. At last, it fell back unexpectedly. Zen had left it behind. Hee, this bloke seems to be blessed with abnormally good luck. The steward laughed. Roger didn't reply and kept on staring at the array plate. They could see that Zen wasn't moving but floating around in a daze. What is he thinking about? Doesn't he dare to dive lower? The steward looked at the array plate and wrinkled his brows. Anyone who cared about what others thought of him would dive inside the lake and find a hidden place to wait around till the end of the time. That way, people wouldn't think that he or she couldn't survive for long in the lake. After all, for some disciples from the noble clans, pride was more important than the point in Cloud Sect and the cubic crystal. But Roger shook his head. Zen is not a disciple from a noble clan, and he won't do that. Of course, Zen wouldn't do that. The entirely unrealistic idea of pride had nothing to do with him. What was more, although he had enough money at hands with thousands of cubic crystals, he didn't want to waste them. It made his heart ache to spend 200 points in 2 hours. How could he waste time here? This array plate could only fix Zen's position, but they couldn't see what was going on inside. The Red Daces group was not created by the magic array, and the array plate couldn't monitor them. So Roger and the steward didn't know that Zen had come to a standstill to get used to the heavy water and figure out a solution. When he finally started to move again, the array plate showed that he was at a tremendous pace. The steward opened his eyes wide and looked at his velocity inside the lake, unable to speak out of astonishment. Roger was also shocked when he saw the same, even though he had stayed out of curiosity and the hope that Zen would do something beyond his expectation. And Zen's velocity in the heavy water was actually far beyond his expectation. It was tremendous. Even Roger couldn't reach this speed now, let alone when he had entered heavy water for the first time. The small dot that represented Zen on the array plate moved at a high speed and then approached the 3 yellow dots. In no time, the 3 disappeared in the magic array plate. Roger and the steward saw that but kept silent. Till now, the hand just moved half a scale on the clock sitting near them. Just 1 hour had passed. Has this bloke been here before? The steward stayed silent for a long while and finally asked. Chapter 169 to 170, Vibration. The steward had asked the question out of instincts. However, he remembered clearly that he had registered the disciple card for Zen for the first time today, which meant that this was surely the first time that Zen had entered the lake of magical fish. Compared to Roger, the steward's shock was even higher. Nature creatures weren't the sole people to practice in the lake. It had faced its fair share of disciples. There were different levels of difficulty inside the lake ranging from the surface to a depth of 300 meters. However, generally speaking, the most a nature creature could penetrate was the first 5 levels, i.e. from the surface to a depth of 150 meters. They almost always lost beyond that. Besides, the water of the lake was also heavier than the usual ones, added to which, was the fact that the deeper you went inside, the greater the pressure you would encounter. At a depth of 10 meters, the water pressure had only the weight of 500 pounds. However, at a depth of 30 meters, it could reach as much as 2,000 pounds. And if one were to venture down to 100 meters, the force he would encounter would be more than 10,000 pounds. It was a horrible experience. A depth of 150 meters was already the limit that the nature creatures could reach. In addition to those horrific levels of water pressure, the practitioners had to face the murlocs in the magic array each time they got cultivated inside the lake. And the power of the murlocs was supposed to increase with increasing depth. The uppermost murlocs were the weakest among all and were called as the 4th grade murlocs. Though not that hard to beat, they were no less powerful than a human being half-step into the nature level. Between 30 meters to 60 meters, the yellow and light blue murlocs would show up. The blue murloc was smaller in size than the yellow one, but was more agile and moved faster. So in a way, its competence was that of a 1st grade nature creature. Beyond the 60 meters mark, more murlocs with higher abilities and competence would appear. Therefore, even if a nature creature had reached the 9th grade of the nature level, he couldn't break the limit of 150 meters. However, there was no shortage of gifted man in the Cloud sect. It was said that 200 years ago, a gifted nature creature had dived to a depth of 190 meters under the lake. This was an accomplishment that usually could only be made by the practitioners of the illuminating soul realm. No one had ever approached or broken this record till now. However, that person was at the 8th grade of the nature level, which was so much higher than Zen's level. After he had killed the 3 murlocs, Zen didn't stay afloat in the same position for a long time. Instead, he kept diving downwards. He could dive at a rapid pace easily in his current condition by waving the fishtail on his back. However, his intentions for visiting the lake were not the mundane practice of diving but to hone and cultivate himself. As he reached a depth of over 60 meters, some blue murlocs appeared in his surrounding waters. The weapons they held were axes made of animals' bones. These blue murlocs were a little smaller than the yellow murlocs and their heads were flat and sharp. Also, they moved faster than the yellow ones and were more offensive. If Zen hadn't condensed that fishtail, he might not have been able to keep up the fight with the blue murlocs for more than a single round. However, when he faced the blue murlocs, he could still maintain a certain advantage in speed. Currently, there were 6 blue murlocs chasing closely after him. Although he was moving much faster than them, it wasn't easy for him to outrun them completely. Bang, bang, bang. The murlocs had known that they couldn't keep up with Zen's speed and therefore had thrown the axes they held in their hands towards him. When these axes rushed towards Zen, they rotated and produced several tiny bubbles as they rent their way across the water. 3 out of the 6 axes hit Zen from behind, and the rest of them went on and blocked his way. These blue murlocs are far more aggressive than those yellow ones, and they are acting very swiftly. It seems that I can't get rid of them if I depend solely on my advantage in speed. I should try something else. Thinking of a plan, Zen took out the broken flying knife from his space ring. Ever since he had dived into the lake, Zen hadn't used any weapon yet. After all, the environment in the water was totally different from that in the air. His flying knife had always been fast in air, but in water, he wasn't so sure. If it lost any speed here, the impact of his flying knife would be decreased greatly. The broken flying knife was still as sharp as usual. It swished across the water easily. However, it seemed that its impact had been reduced significantly by the resistance of the heavy water. The flying KNFE that Zen had thrown hit only one axe. Then it was lost to turbulence. Fortunately, since the axe had been split apart by his flying knife, an opening showed up in front of Zen, and therefore, he found a chance to break out and seized it. Actually, Zen's strength was much greater than those blue murlocs, so he was wondering why the broken flying knife he had thrown out was much weaker than the axes those blue murlocs had thrown out. He kept on pondering the question as he dodged the murlocs. He had already made sure that the axes were nothing more than some common animal bones. However, after being thrown out, they had kept on rotating at a very high speed and produced countless tiny bubbles. After being wrapped by those bubbles, their speed had seemed to be increased significantly. Bubbles. How were these bubbles produced? Was it because of the rotation of the axes? If so, I can make my knife rotate too, Zen thought to himself. Then he hooked his thumb slightly, and the broken flying knife which had been flushed away flew back immediately. The next time he threw out the flying knife, it was rotating at a very high speed too. However, although its rotating speed wasn't slower than that of the axes, all that appeared in the water were some swirls. And after a short while, the flying knife even stopped rotating because of the water resistance. It seems that the bubbles were not produced by the mere rotation of the axes. They must have used some other method, Zen thought. In order to find the answer, when those blue murlocs attacked him again, Zen reached out and tried to grab an axe while dodging the attack of the other ones. But the moment he touched the axe, he felt a sharp pain in his hand. He was shocked and drew his hand back immediately. He found that several tiny wounds had appeared on his hand. If his body hadn't been as solid as a spiritual weapon, Zen might have lost his hand there and then. I got it. He suddenly understood why those axes could produce so many bubbles. In the course of their rotating, they were vibrating at an extremely fast speed, which was why a large number of bubbles were being produced. After being wrapped by these bubbles, the axes would rotate like in the air, so their rotation speed increased significantly. However, how did they manage to vibrate those axes? Now Zen wasn't eager at all to dive downwards. Since his purpose of coming to the lake of the magical fish was to cultivate, if he could acquire some skills while in the lake, then the points he had spent would be worth it. Taking the advantage of his speed, Zen had left those blue murlocs far behind. Although these axes were a threat to Zen, they were not enough to kill him. Moreover, since he was in a magic array, even if he was killed because of his own mistakes, he wouldn't die in reality, and would be merely sent back to the surface of the lake of the magical fish instead. After keeping a certain distance from those blue murlocs, Zen began to attract the axes to attack him. When a murloc was just about to throw his axe, Zen suddenly saw his short but strong paw become a blur. Meanwhile, the axe in his hand turned into a blur too. I didn't guess it wrong. The murloc's paw was vibrating rapidly at the moment he threw out his axe. Zen stared closely at the murloc who was about to throw the axe. With the rapid vibration, a lot of tiny bubbles appeared. After reaching a certain number, the bubbles wrapped the axe completely, and it was then that the murloc threw the axe out. The world was big and full of remarkably wonders. Flowers, plants, animals, and birds were all unique, and they each had their own unique set of skills. Strictly speaking, the blue murloc wasn't a mighty creature. However, they still had their own specific skill. There weren't many other creatures who could vibrate at such a high speed. However, the blue murlocs had done it with their strong front paw. The corporeal body of an ordinary man couldn't increase his vibration frequency to such a horrible level. However, it wasn't a problem for Zen. Because first, his corporeal body was much tougher than that of an average man, he could bear the negative effects caused by such intense vibrations. Second, the phoenix crystal embedded in his right arm had increased his speed significantly. After knowing what had caused the vibration, Zen flashed through the water and dodged the axe which was flying right towards him. Meanwhile, he pulled his broken flying knife back and held it tightly in his hand. The power of the phoenix crystal came out from his arm and spread all over his arm along the meridian of it. Vibration. Zen narrowed his eyes and began to swing his right arm up and down. At the beginning, he swung his arm in a large range, as if he was waving it. However, soon his swing range became smaller and his strokes became shorter. With the smaller swing range, his speed became faster. After a short while, his arm started turning into a blur gradually. Because of the extremely high vibrating speed, one couldn't even distinguish that it was an arm. At the same time, a large number of tiny bubbles came out along his arm. With the sound of gurgles, his arm started looking like it was covered by boiling water. As soon as the bubbles came out, they started floating upwards in the lake. In addition to Zen's arm, the broken flying knife in his right hand was also vibrating at an extremely high speed. Hit it. With the high-speed vibration, Zen suddenly threw the broken flying knife out. Glug, glug. Of course, no sound of air breaking could be heard in the water. However, a string of intense and tiny bubbles appeared when the broken flying knife flew out. With the technique, the speed of the broken flying knife had increased more than tenfold. It flew only a little bit slower than it did in the air. And in the heavy water, such speed was already an amazing horror. Now Zen's broken flying knives had dwarfed the axes thrown out by those blue murlocs. The blue murloc not far away could never have expected that Zen would have copied their method in such a short time. As soon as he saw the flying knife coming towards him with a string of bubbles, he thrust forward with his frog leg-like legs, trying to run away. Of course Zen wouldn't let go of him. Although the murloc had already dodged the flight route of the broken flying knife, as soon as Zen pulled it, the broken flying knife arced in the water and cut at him, who was immediately transformed into bright spots. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Chapter 170, Argument. It was much easier for Zen to deal with the remaining blue murlocs once he had mastered the trick of raising his speed through vibrations. After shuttling a few more times, he killed the remaining 5 of them. As the flying knife glided back into his hands, Zen continued to swim in the lake quietly. He looked down into its depth contemplatively. Without wasting another breath, Zen dived in. He seemed to have forgotten that his reserve time was almost up. He killed each of the 6 blue murlocs, the steward mumbled grimly, seated on the stone bench next to the shores of the lake of the magical fish. His face had turned dull in the state of shock. On the other hand, Roger was mostly calm when he saw what happened. He had gone for training once he returned from the south. Now that he was confident that he had greatly improved in his skills and strength, he came to the lake of the magical fish for further practice. When fully prepped, he could only dive in about 70 meters deep into the water. He knew there were many more blue murlocs in the lakebed. He couldn't fight so many of them at once. However, Zen, on his first go itself, dived deeper than even Roger could. He even killed 6 blue murlocs. Roger didn't know what to make of Zen. The only word he could think of to describe him was extraordinary. There was no feeling of frustration in Roger's heart, even though Zen had clearly rattled quite a few of the others. He was good friends with Zen, and the latter had come to owe him a favor back when they were in the south. Looking at the speed of his cultivation, Roger was sure his friend would become a man of great power. He thought of what Zen had promised him in the south, and figured that he would come to the Meng family's aid in the future. The better Zen performed, the higher Roger's expectations would be with regard to him. Just then, a group of people walked up to the slate. There were about 7 or 8 of them, all dressed in jet black robes, indicating that they were inner disciples. Truth be told, almost all disciples who came to the lake of the magical fish were inner disciples, most born and brought up in the noble clans. Outer disciples were not powerful enough to dive down the lake at all, and there were only a few inner ones who could afford the points to practice in the lake of the magical fish. "Sao, is there anybody in the lake of the magical fish currently?" asked one of the disciples from a distance. The steward's last name was Sao, so everyone referred to him as that. As soon as he saw the inner disciple, Steward Sao got up and greeted them with a smile. "Hello, Bob, there is still a disciple in the lake of the magical fish. He has it reserved for 2 hours. He should come out anytime soon." Bob Pei. Roger, who sat on the bench next to where they stood, frowned as he heard the name. The top 7 noble clans always schemed against each other. They were well versed in backstabbing and betrayal. But no matter how fierce their secret battles were with each other, they pretended that all was good on the surface, never revealing their venomous thoughts. Besides, the Pei family and the Meng family had always loathed each other. This man, Bob, was a direct descendant of the Pei clan. He had the same status as Roger. However, Bob was several years older than Roger, so he was undoubtedly stronger too. He had already reached the nature-level consummation, which was only one step away from the illuminating soul realm. Presumably, Bob had been making the best use of his time lately. Roger was sure that Bob was ardent in his endeavor to reach the illuminating soul realm. Despite the friction between the two families and Bob's obvious strength, Roger didn't feel threatened on seeing him. With an expressionless face, he sat silently by himself, avoiding Bob as if he hadn't noticed his arrival at all. The young man named Bob Pei walked toward Steward Cao, his footsteps hitting the ground with force. He stared at the magic array plate in the steward's hands. How much longer would it take? Bob, the disciple went into the lake of the magical fish at 2 o'clock. He reserved it only for 2 hours, so he should come out at 4. Look, the clock says the time is nearly up. He should be out soon, Steward Cao replied politely, respect for Bob evident in his voice. He was deferential toward Bob only because many elders of the Pei clan occupied important positions in the Cloud sect. One of them was a superior he answered to. Cao needed to be in the good books of Pei clan if he hoped to get a promotion in the future. Glancing at the clock, Bob huffed, time is already up. Call him out now. Bob, please wait for some time. You only need to stand by for 15 more minutes, Steward Cao tried to persuade him. He knew Bob was an impatient man, but he couldn't pull Zen out of the lake right now when the boy was obviously training. At the steward's words, Bob nodded and asked the group behind him to take seats. After a while, Steward Cao looked at the magic array plate and murmured, his brows drawn together, time is almost up. Why hasn't Zen come out yet? Roger glimpsed at the magic array plate and found that Zen was still underwater. He had encountered a few murlocs, then it seemed he dived more than 90 meters into the depths. Did the boy have a limit at all? The pressure of the waves was very high at that kind of distance downward. If Zen hadn't been exceptional, he would have been flattened into a meat pie by the intense pressure. It was difficult for even a nature creature to fight the indomitable pressure face down at 90 meters, but Zen looked like he strove to dive even deeper. Roger was eager to know how much more Zen could get to. Perhaps he wants to test how deep he can go, he exclaimed. But the time is up, and there are some others waiting here, Steward Cao retorted in an anxious voice. As a steward of the Cloud sect, he had a good eye. He knew well about Zen's potential, whose performance at the Lake of the Magical Fish was exceptional and rare amidst the talents at the Cloud sect. With time, Zen would only get better. He was a boy to watch out for, as he would certainly rise through the ranks in the future. Cao was aware that soon he would need to curry favor with Zen. However, he knew better than to test the temper of the young man, Bob. The disciples from the noble clans would never listen to someone they thought was beneath them. Moreover, he knew that Bob had gotten into fights before regarding who should be prioritized to enter the Lake of the Magical Fish. His disputes always led to more trouble. Bob had an infamous temper. Today, he found it distasteful to wait for 15 minutes for someone. That said a lot about him. Bob pulled a long face, his lips twisting with disdain. Usually, he was the man who was waited upon, even at odd hours of the day. How dare they ask him to wait for someone else for so long? Hasn't the disciple come out yet? Cao, you said he would come out at 4 p.m., didn't you? It's already 4 now, Bob reminded him in an unpleasant tone. Steward Cao straightened sheepishly, a reassuring smile on his face. Please wait for a minute. Just one more minute, he should come out soon. Brusquely, Bob got up. I won't wait for him any longer. The time is up, you should force him out now by using the magic array plate. Aye, Steward Cao stammered, his mouth gaping, not knowing what to say. Bob left him in a fix. He would undoubtedly offend Zen if he pushed him out through the magic array, but it would vex Bob if he didn't listen to his command. It wouldn't be too consequential if he offended Zen now, who was just an outer disciple at present. He wouldn't pose a threat to Cao's position. But if he offended Bob, and Bob told his elders about the incident, he could make Cao's life at Cloud sect difficult. Appearing to think for a moment, Steward Cao came to a decision. Neither of his options was likable, but he must choose the one that would bring him less harm. He would have to displease Zen today. He opened the magic array plate, about to reach out to pull Zen out of the Lake of the Magical Fish. But before he could do so, Roger, who was next to him, halted him in his action. Steward Cao, you don't need to be in such a rush. Steward Cao widened his eyes. But, Roger's words made his head spin. Roger was always friendly and courteous to him, but he was also a disciple from one of the top 7 noble clans. If Cao could not afford to offend the Pei clan, he could not afford to do the same with the Meng clan either. Bob threw Roger a cold look. He had spotted the Meng boy as soon as he got here. The two families were always at odds with each other. The elders always had control over their tempers and they were cordial outwardly. They only expressed their displeasure and disagreements in hushed whispers and backhanded wisecracks. However, the tempers of the younger lot were not easy to restrain. There had been many brawls between the young members of the families on several occasions in the imperial capital. Bob had turned a blind eye to Roger when he saw him first. He came here to train today, so he had no reason to argue with Roger. He had hoped that Roger would stay quiet so neither of them would have cause to encroach on the precincts of the other. But he hadn't expected Roger to provoke him by interrupting Steward Cao when he was about to use the magic array. Was Roger so eager to get into an argument with him? Bob knew Roger's strength was far inferior to his. If a fight were to happen between them, Roger would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage. An image of the arrogant faces of the Meng family members rose up in his mind. It would do him good to teach Roger a lesson today, for the mere fact that he dared to argue with him. Roger, you know it's time for me to train. I can't wait for the boy forever if he has no plans of coming out, Bob said, his voice slightly shaking with anger. Roger shook his head indifferently. The disciple in the lake is my friend, and he has no intention of taking up your time. He reserved 2 hours, but it seems that the time did not end up being enough for him. Don't worry, I will pay for the extra hours on his behalf. I have enough points that can be docked. Bob stilled, and the look he threw Roger was chilling. Your points? You think you can pay for the extra hours he uses? Cao, is this permissible? Steward Cao had an anxious look on his face. He glanced at Bob before speaking to Roger. Roger, I think I need to ask your friend to come out now. After all, the time he reserved is over. What, can't I add more time on his behalf? I have plenty of points. You can take as many as you want. Not just 2 hours, my points are enough to pay for 20 more. You can keep docking them until Zen comes out of the lake, Roger said, his face hard. He was always polite and kind, but when someone angered him, he could get quite overbearing. Steward Cao was in an awful dilemma. He had no clue about what to do. He wanted to start the magic array and pull Zen out, but looking at the expression on Roger's face, he dared not to do it. On the other hand, it was not possible for him to dissuade Bob either. He knew all about Bob's terrible temper. They say that the Meng family members are good at assessing a situation and judging what to do, but I don't think you are quite adept at it, sneered Bob, a look of hatred in his eyes as he stared at Roger. Momentum slowly built up in his body as the words escaped him. He had reached the nature-level consummation, which was only one step away from the illuminating soul realm. Roger stood up the moment he heard what Bob said, his eyes too darkening with malice. You dare to fight me on the Cloud Sect grounds? Do you know the price you'll pay for that transgression? Chapter 171, Make Way for You. Last time as well Bob fought at the banks of the lake. But at that time, his opponent was a young man from a small noble clan. Small noble clans were naturally inferior to the top 7 noble clans. Sometimes, they had to bear the humiliation from the top 7 noble clans. So it was not a big deal for young masters of the top 7 noble clans to beat other people. If their elders offered apologies for their bad behavior, it might become a great honor to the small clans. Roger was a young master of the Meng clan, one of the top 7 noble clans. But he was not as overbearing and unreasonable as most noble youth. Roger treated people with kindness. Since both Roger's and Bob's families were ranked in the top 7 noble clans, a fight between them would cause a lot of trouble. It would also lead to conflicts between the 2 noble clans. Moreover, the relationship between the Pei clan and the Meng clan was already strained. However, Bob was a reckless person. Every martial arts cultivator had an obsession in his mind. Some obsessed over possession as a strong desire to possess could give them enough momentum to break through bottlenecks in their cultivation. Others preferred concession. They believed that moderate concessions could make the future smoother and brighter. And Bob's obsession was possession. There was no concession in his dictionary. He had been selfish since his childhood. Everyone else had to step aside for what he wanted. If Bob endured something reluctantly, his determination would suffer to the extent that it would slow his cultivation speed. Although Bob knew it was unwise to fight Roger, he was unwilling to compromise. He had no consideration for the consequences of the fight. Instead, he was consumed with the idea of teaching Roger a lesson. However, Roger was not a coward. Although there was a gap between his level and that of Bob, as a member of the top nobleman clan, he could be stubborn as well. Please wait. Listen to me first. Let's sit down and talk calmly. There is no need to be so tense, begged Steward Cao. The two noble young masters refused to listen to each other and were about to fight. Steward Cao became anxious as the tension mounted. According to the rules of Cloud Sect, except for formal challenges, any fight between disciples was unacceptable. Nevertheless, these two young men were members of the top noble clans. They both had a powerful background and were not afraid of stirring up trouble. If not handled properly, Steward Cao would offend the nobles, because no matter which side won, the affected clan would vent their anger on him. Forget it. The Meng clan have become increasingly arrogant. Last month, they tried to get involved in the Pei clan's pill medicine business. However, they were blocked by the Pei clan's elders. If we tolerate the Meng clan blindly, I am afraid that they will become more insatiable. After saying that, Bob drew his long sword out of its sheath. It looked like Bob not only wanted to beat Roger, he also wanted Roger to bleed. Seeing this, Roger also unsheathed his sword, even though his cultivation level was lower than Bob's. However, a refiner's cultivation level was not an indicator of strength. If Roger tried his best, Bob might not be able to defeat him. The people escorting Bob stood aside and silently watched them. If Bob were facing an average person like Zen, they would have rushed to help. But this time, Bob's rival was Roger. As outsiders, they knew that they should not intervene in conflicts between the two top noble clans. If they tried, these people would invite trouble, and then, even the Pei clan wouldn't be able to protect them. Just as the battle was about to begin, Zen sprung out of the lake of the magical fish. The demonic life vitality running in his body drove the cold away instantly. The heat emitted by the demonic life vitality helped evaporate the water from Zen's clothes and hair. As Zen exited the lake, a huge cloud of steam rose from his body. Before Zen could look around for Roger, he sensed strong hostility in the air. Strange. Who are they? How can they fight here? This is Cloud Sect. Aren't they afraid of violating the rules? Zen wondered as he studied the crowd from a distance. Zen cautiously approached the crowd. Soon, Zen found Roger was arguing with a young man who appeared to be stronger than Roger in terms of both momentum and level. When Zen saw this, his expression changed and he hurried forward. What's going on? Who is he? Roger. Roger had helped Zen when they hunted the blade locusts together at the Dragon Fort. Since then, Zen regarded Roger as his friend. As if Steward Cao had met a great savior, once he saw Zen, he went forward and said, Zen, you're here just in time. They are about to fight. Please talk to Roger. Stop the fight. Why are they going to fight? Questioned Zen. Zen didn't know what had happened while he was refining in the lake of the magical fish. With his easygoing personality, Roger usually did not enter into conflict with others. But once he got angry, he could be very stubborn. Why did the man offend Roger? Zen asked when he got no response. Steward Cao explained hastily, Zen, the young man opposite Roger is the young master of the Pei clan, one of the top 7 noble clans. You were in the lake of the magical fish for more than 2 hours. I was going to bring you out, but Roger wanted me to let you stay. However, Bob refused as it was his turn. So they began to quarrel. If they fight, it will end badly for everyone. Please, persuade your friend. When Steward Cao saw Zen, he thought, as an ordinary person, Zen wouldn't want to get involved in the noble clan's dispute. Once he understands the matter, he will persuade Roger. After all, Zen is Roger's friend. So Roger may listen to him. Moreover, Roger is weaker than Bob. So if a friend persuades him and gives him a way out, Roger won't go so far as to fight. But Steward Cao was wrong. He had made a mistake when estimating Zen's character and his strength. After hearing the steward's explanation, Zen nodded. Although Steward Cao's narration was somewhat incomplete, Zen understood what happened and who was at fault. Go, Zen, go and persuade Roger. I will speak with Bob. Steward Cao urged Zen. Zen walked toward Roger. Roger relaxed when he saw Zen. Although Roger didn't think that Zen could defeat Bob, somehow, he had an inexplicable sense of trust in Zen. It seemed to him that Zen was capable of challenging strong people. This is none of your business, boy. I advise you not to meddle with the noble clans, said Bob threateningly as he looked at Zen up and down. Bob was surprised to see that the person who had been practicing for 2 hours in the lake of the magical fish was only at the first grade of the nature level. But Bob was curious about why a disciple at the first grade of the nature level was allowed to enter the lake of the magical fish. As for how Zen stayed for 2 hours, Bob thought that perhaps Zen didn't really go into the water, or maybe he hid in a corner and didn't dive into the deep area. Bob was not really interested in how Zen had stayed for so long. What annoyed Bob was that Zen, a cultivator at the first grade of the nature level, didn't take him seriously. Bob even thought that his dissuasion, although rude, was for Zen's benefit. Hearing what Bob said, Zen shook his head. Roger is my friend. A friend in need is a friend indeed. If my friend is in trouble, I will naturally help him. What's more, I've just heard that you wanted to drive me out of the lake of the magical fish. Is that true? Zen showed a harsh attitude toward Bob. It was evident that he was trying to help Roger. Since Zen had cleared his position, Bob had no reason to hesitate. If Zen was at the illuminating soul realm, Bob might think carefully before fighting. But Zen was only at the first grade of the nature level. What instigated Bob more was that Zen didn't come from an influential family. Bob was at the consummation of the nature level. It was difficult to find someone skilled enough to challenge Bob. Hence he chuckled and said, "Yes, you were right. So what about it? Every time I come to the lake of the magical fish to practice, other people make way obediently." "Yeah," Zen replied scornfully. "I'm thinking, who are you to me? I should make way for you. Wishful thinking." "Tut tut," Steward Cao said with a deep sigh. When Steward Cao heard Zen, he had a feeling that the situation was not going to be peacefully resolved. If a fight ensued, everyone would get into trouble. A bitter taste filled Steward Cao's mouth. Previously, when Steward Cao let Zen enter the lake of the magical fish, he believed the boy to be gentle and suave. He hadn't expected Zen to have a hot temper. Chapter 172, The Chilly Water Drops. A gust of wind blew gently against the seemingly cold atmosphere among the nature creatures. Did Zen not know who was in front of him? Or perhaps, was he not fully aware of the strength of the top 7 noble clans? From his worry-free face, it looked like he didn't take Bob seriously at all. Now, Steward Cao truly regretted his decision. He should have explained Bob's identity further to Zen, and let him know that the top clan members were big shots that he shouldn't offend as he was a nobody. However, Steward Cao quickly realized that even his previous explanation was useless. Zen already knew about Bob's social status, but he still didn't take him seriously. Upon hearing what Zen said, Roger's eyes also bulged in surprise. To be honest, he was moved when Zen stood beside him at this time. After all, Zen knew that Roger did just what he did to help him, so now he didn't hesitate to stand by Roger when they met a master at the top of the nature level. However, Zen had been too arrogant. He didn't take Bob's strength into account. When they were in the south before, Roger had seen Zen's unbridled and carefree attitude. During that time, Zen wasn't a nature creature yet, but just at half step into the nature level. Yet, he dared to use his soul to attack and injure Randall, who was at the 4th grade of the nature level, and directly reprimanded and insulted him. But now it was a completely different story. He finally met someone who was a world different from Randall. First of all, the difference of the strength between Bob and Zen was much greater than that between Zen and Randall at that time. Furthermore, Bob had a completely different background from Randall. Randall came from a poor family that didn't have a good background, but was able to go up. However, Bob was a noble son of the Pei clan. At that time, Randall felt repressed by Roger's background and the pressure from John, so he could bear it. But now, what good came out after having irritated Bob? At this point, Bob's facial expression suddenly changed. His fair-skinned face suddenly flushed a blood-red shade, because apparently he was extremely angry. However, it was strange that the reddish tint on his skin disappeared while a red fog rose from the top of his head at the same time. After a while, his complexion returned to normal. From this incident, it was obvious that Bob used a special cultivation method to control his anger. He had kept his rage in check, but that didn't mean he would forgive Zen. Many warriors would vent their discontent in their own ways to keep calm. For instance, when in a fit of rage, some people would laugh wildly, others cried desperately, and some even injured themselves just to calm down. On the other hand, Bob's method was special. It looked like he drove out the blood that had flown to his head with some kind of cultivation method to keep calm. Be calm. Only when he was calm could he figure out the best solution. Now, Bob was actually deep in thought. His warrior spirit was, not to bear, but it didn't mean that he was a rash man. There were only a few people in Burning Sky Empire who dared to speak insolently in front of him, which could mean that they must be from powerful families. Therefore, when he saw how Zen acted so boldly, he tried to figure out his identity. No matter where this bloke was from, Bob was unwilling to let go. However, he would take different measures. It was true that the top 7 noble clans had the power, but there were people above them. While Bob could be considered as wildly arrogant, he wasn't ignorant. Bob's eyes glinted maliciously and he cast a murderous look at Zen. "Who are you? Tell me your name," he demanded loudly. Unless he was sure about Zen's true identity, he had better think twice before taking action. Just as Zen was about to speak, Roger, who stood beside him, moved a step forward and gestured for Zen to stop. While Roger truly appreciated that Zen was willing to stand up for him, he was worried that if Zen got involved in the conflict between the Meng and Pei clans, he would probably get into so much trouble. Thus, he wanted to save Zen. "Bob, it doesn't matter who he is. If you are aiming at me today, come on," Roger said boldly. However, Zen was not to be outdone just yet. "I am the outer disciple at Drizzle Peak, Zen Luo," he responded loudly. So this Zen guy wasn't from a prominent family, but just an outer disciple from Drizzle Peak, the least powerful peak. Reddish color rose again in Bob's face in anger. He felt like he was tricked. This bloke was just an outer disciple from a poor family without any background, and he was only at grade 1 of the nature level. Why did he feel like he qualified to be so arrogant in front of Bob? When he thought about how cautious he acted in front of this nobody, he couldn't control his rage. Good, very good. Now the reptiles from poor families are more and more conceited. I guess the only way to deal with them is to do nothing but tramp them hard to dust," Bob exclaimed. The remaining bits of hesitation he had now thoroughly disappeared. His previous unfathomable unease towards Zen had only served to make him more furious, so he decided to attack now. When Roger saw that Bob was about to fight, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Even if he had greatly honed his strengths, he was not on par with Bob, who had already completed the nature level. But Roger was a resourceful man. The moment he saw the reluctance in Bob's eyes, he stopped Zen just now to protect him, and to also exert Bob's uneasiness towards him to temporarily hold Bob off. However, Zen didn't appreciate his gesture and instead, revealed to Bob his identity. Now, Zen had just told Bob that he didn't have any background or support and was a mere nobody. "If you are capable, just kill me," Zen goaded. This time, Bob now prepared to fight for real. There was no way Roger could stop it. Alas, Zen had the outstanding talent, but lacked the observation and judgment skills for certain occasions, such as this fight. Roger could only sigh to himself. The baby blue-colored life vitality flowed through Bob's body as the treasured sword in his hand was unsheathed. When Bob unsheathed the sword, a light and long sound resonated from within it. The nice, translucent weapon spread the baby blue beams of light everywhere. Bob wielded and waved the sword in his hand as the life vitality covered its see-through body and formed a succession of water drops. That was the water drop swordsmanship of the Pei clan. The tenacious swordsmanship could be described as ruthless and fierce. According to the rank of the cultivation methods, this swordsmanship was one of the Tier 3 cultivation methods, but as the exclusive swordsmanship of the Pei clan, it was said that it could be one of the Tier 4 when judged by the rate. High up in the air was Bob, who wielded the treasured sword against Roger and Zen. He now had a plan in mind. Roger was from the Meng clan and couldn't be killed, but Bob could teach him a lesson. While the life of the conceited and ignorant bloke would surely be taken away today. When Bob waved the sword, countless water drops splashed and reflected with the transparent light under the sunshine. They formed a huge dense net and aimed at Zen and Roger. The water drop made from the life vitality looked like the ordinary water drop, but both Roger and Zen clearly knew that they couldn't touch any of them. "Zen, go away," Roger screamed. He held his sword in hand with rapt attention and aimed at those water drops. The dark red sword radiance with the thickness of a thumb swallowed and spat the drops successively. Every time after the sword radiance exploded a water drop, a chilly power burst out from the water drop. It then expanded to the size of an ice ball and smashed the ground. Even the hard flagstone on the ground was smashed into fine, powdery smithereens. The water drop exploded in the air but had such astonishing power. If it exploded on the human body, nobody knew what the effect would be. At this moment, Roger rapidly waved the sword about, and the sword radiance unceasingly swallowed and spat to explode one water drop after another. However, Bob had released more water drops. Even if Roger had exploded dozens of water drops in an instant, hundreds of Bob's water drops charged at him. This left Roger almost no choices now. He didn't have the time to care about anything else. He had to wield the sword fast and try his best to destroy all the water drops. While Roger was fully engaged in exploding the water drops, Zen suddenly gripped the back of his robe. Roger was abruptly pulled backward by an irresistible, great force. Now, it was just Zen who faced the numerous water drops that flew in many directions. Chapter 173, Grab the Sword with Bare Hands. Each droplet of water contained a remarkably strong and numbing icy power. One simple condensation of the moisture in the air could form such a powerful ice ball. If these water drops touched anyone, the person could seriously get hurt. After residing in a secluded area to practice for quite some time, Roger's abilities had improved a lot. It took a lot of dedication, but now he had reached the 5th grade of the nature level. Despite everything, however, he found Zen effortlessly tossing him for more than 100 feet away. Immediately standing up from the ground, Roger tried to give Zen a hand. However, when he saw the man stand as steadfastly as a hill, a wonderful feeling overcame him. Is he so confident that he would succeed in his fight against Bob? He wondered. Truthfully, Zen was not a reckless person. In Roger's opinion though, he appeared quite irrational when he had lost his temper and picked a fight at Dragon Fort as well as the army camp. It did not seem to matter that most of his rivals were simply stronger. On the other hand, the results indicated that he was a reliable and confident man, even before each fight. With Bob as his rival this time, does he really think he is more powerful? Roger thought to himself. As soon as he made the assumption, he could not help but be skeptical. Somehow, Roger thought he knew the big difference between the 1st grade and the top grade of nature level. Beside him, Steward Sao knew about it too. And Bob knew it even better than both of them. It was common knowledge since all of them had practiced from the 1st grade of the nature level to their present level. But then, why was Zen so confident? It was either he was, indeed, powerful enough to overcome his opponent, or he was just another cocky idiot. By the looks of it, Zen did not look like the second option. What could it be then? Was he perhaps powerful enough to win this battle? With a gust of wind, Zen waved his fists in the air while the water droplets scattered. Demonic life vitality unceasingly flowed before him as he waved his fists, forming a defensive barrier to protect himself. The dark purple demonic life vitality reflected an unusual glow of light. Inside the demonic life vitality, some glistening star strength emitted blue light. Are you trying to repel my chilly water drops with your life vitality alone? Bob asked incredulously, and then he snorted. Dream on, like that's ever going to work. However, the man he was taunting remained silent. Paying no attention to him at all, Zen appeared to be rather calm and serious behind the demonic life vitality. Although he was confident that he could repel every attack from different nature creatures, he knew that Bob's power had almost reached an illuminating Soul Realm Master's level, and the disciples of Cloud Sect had always been stronger compared to the practitioners outside. Even though he felt the first drop of water tearing down the demonic life vitality barrier easily, he did not do anything to get out of the way. Instead, he waited for a perfect chance in silence to retaliate. Soon, more water droplets breached the demonic life vitality barrier, and they drew closer to him with barely any resistance. Some of the water droplets were dangerously close to Zen, probably less than 3 feet away from him. The chillness emanating from these water droplets made him feel the sudden dip in temperature. A thin layer of frost covered his eyelashes and hair. However, he continued to stand still as if he was being nailed on the ground. After most of the water drops had entered the range of the life vitality, Zen abruptly shouted, "Explode!" With an uncommon rumbling sound, he released the overwhelming energy of the star power in the life vitality. Meanwhile, it triggered the explosion of the stars around it. Rumble, 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 more stars exploded at once. One by one, little by little, from point to surface and to the whole life vitality space Zen had arranged, a violent and overwhelming reaction ensued. The energy released by the exploded stars emitted a dazzling white light. The light was brighter than sunshine. Looking at it was nearly unbearable. If an individual glanced at the white light for even just a short moment, he would be unable to look at other things for a long while due to temporary blindness. Although impermanent, it would take a while for one's eyes to recover. Except for Zen, the 3 other men lost their eyesight temporarily as they had watched the stars explode. Zen had turned his head away and closed his eyes right at the time the overwhelming energy burst out. When Zen opened his eyes again, the star's explosion wiped out the chilly water droplets. Unlike him, Bob's eyes had not completely recovered from the white light yet. Of course, Zen dared not to miss such a great opportunity. Before Bob could see again, he had rushed towards him like a cheetah running on the grassland. Although Bob could not see anything at that moment, he was still alert enough to counterattack. All nature creatures possessed sharp senses such as taste, smell, hearing, and sight. So it was only right that Bob had acute senses. Even with his eyes closed, he could still detect Zen's presence. After seeing Zen's competency, Bob could not calm himself down anymore. Initially, he had thought that Zen just wanted to use his life vitality as a barrier to block his attack. If so, the man would die rapidly, as the impact of his chilly water drop was much stronger than that. To his surprise, Zen had taken a more direct and violent method. He had triggered the explosion of his life vitality directly. Bob never imagined that the energy of the explosion would be so horrible, it even eliminated all his chilly water drops. It was why Bob panicked. He wondered why Zen's life vitality was so powerful. The energy of the little stars in Zen's life vitality was so great that Bob's heart trembled. However, as a master at consummation of the nature level, Bob's mind had already tampered in various kinds of situations in the process of cultivating from a beginner to such a high level. He realized that besides keeping himself calm, he should counterattack his opponents immediately. After sensing Zen's location, Bob waved his sword to him. He waved so hard that the sword, which was as thin as a cicada's wings, was almost bent to its breaking point. Then, tens of thousands of chilly water drops suddenly shot out. Anyhow, these water droplets should be able to hold off Zen's attack, Bob thought to himself. However, he had gravely underestimated Zen's speed. In fact, Zen had not dodged those water droplets, not because he could not deflect any of them, but that he just did not try. Since the situation was quite different at this instant, he tried his best to suppress Bob. The phoenix crystal in his right arm suddenly gleamed. The energy coursed through his veins and then spread all over his body. Phew! Suddenly, Zen turned into a blur. Like a gust of wind, he dispersed those chilly water drops from the sky covered by them. Just then, the vision of Roger, Sao and Bob returned. When they saw Zen had turned into a blur, they were so surprised that they almost thought it was an illusion. How fast! Roger could not help but cry out. At the same time, Bob realized he could not perceive Zen either. Where's he? He wondered, looking around. He placed his sword in front of his chest horizontally and maintained maximum alert as he waited for Zen to strike. All of a sudden, Bob felt a small hint of wind coming from above his head, and then he waved his sword upward instinctively. Reaching out from above the head of Bob, Zen aimed at Bob's sword blade. "You want to grab my sword with bare hands?" thought Bob in surprise. Immediately, he laughed and shouted, "You're dicing with death." The sword in Bob's hand was a middle-grade spiritual weapon. As it was made of the Polaris steel, it was extremely thin. This particular sword had been sent to the weapon refining workshop of his family before. After being burned to red by the weapon refiner, the sword blade had become nearly transparent. So one could imagine how thin it was. Being so thin, if the sword had been made of ordinary material, it would have broken soon after the slightest touch. Only when it was made with the Polaris steel, which was tough enough, could the sword be refined so thin. Being so narrowly thin, it was much sharper than ordinary swords. How dare the young man grab my sword with his bare hands? Let me cut his hands off. Thinking about this, Bob shook his arm hard and the sword vibrated quickly before cutting towards Zen's wrist. With a slight smile, Zen pushed his right hand forward lightly and pinched the tip of Bob's sword in the blink of an eye. So fast, Bob shouted in his heart. He wondered why Zen could control his speed to such a degree. Sometimes fast, other times slow. The man's moves were so unpredictable. Although Zen pinched his sword blade, Bob did not worry about it. He suddenly withdrew his sword and tried to stab Zen again. Shocked, Bob's face turned pale when he tried to withdraw his sword. In spite of the advantages he had, he still failed to grab his sword back. First, as he was holding the sword handle, whereas Zen was only pinching the sword blade with 2 fingers, it would have been much easier for him to apply force on the sword. Second, Bob had reached the consummation of the nature level while Zen had just reached the first grade of the nature level. In every way one looked, Bob should have had an absolute advantage in terms of strength. When Bob tried for the second time, however, he failed again. The sword appeared as though it was embedded between Zen's fingers. With an utmost disbelief expression on his face, Bob looked like he had seen a ghost. There was no doubt that he had met many people who were born with great strength. He knew a man who seemed to possess endless strength. When this man had just reached the marrow refining level, he was able to compete with the masters at half step into the nature level. However, even though they were born with great strength, they had their limit. How could the strength of a corporeal body like Zen's have reached such an extent? There was a world of difference between the top-grade nature level practitioners and the first-grade nature level practitioners. Now, because of Zen, Bob had changed his view. No one saw it coming. Not even he could have imagined that he would somehow admit that Zen was much stronger than him. After recovering from a brief shock, Bob immediately activated the life vitality in his body. By any means, he was not someone who would throw in the towel so easily. Losing to a young man at first grade of the nature level was very unacceptable for him. The life vitality came out from his arm and emanated upward along his sword before solidifying into white snowflakes on the sword's blade. Then, the snowflakes formed a long and thin line and quickly mounted on the tip of the sword blade. Chapter 174, Real Strength. Icy Seal, Freeze, Crackle. After reaching the sword tip, these snowflakes suddenly turned into ice crystals. In an instant, they covered Zen's right hand. Soon, the right half of Zen's body was frozen. Zen frowned as these ice crystals covered his hand. He used force to break them. However, these ice crystals were not normal. Even with the enormous power running through his body, Zen couldn't do anything to them. Ha ha, they are not standard ice crystals. You can't break them with brute force. So what are you going to do with them this time, little boy? Bob smiled coldly as his icy seal froze Zen. Instead of panicking, Zen looked at Bob with calm eyes. There was even some contempt in his expression. With a sly smile, Zen raised his left hand. In the next instant, the emerald crystal in his arm suddenly erupted in bright red energy. Bang! Zen used his left fist to pound his right arm. A blood-red mark glowed on the ice crystals covering his arm. And then, the blood-red mark spread like a cobweb. Next, Zen clenched his right fist and freed himself from the ice crystals. Lash! The icy seal on his right arm and body was instantly broken into tiny pieces of ice crystals. That's impossible. Bob couldn't believe what he had just seen. The icy seal was the quintessence of his power. He had spent a lot of time and effort making it work. The icy seal was so challenging to master that Bob hadn't succeeded until recently. This was the first time that he had used the icy seal to fight against his enemy. Bob's father had once told him that only burning life vitality of a person at the illuminating soul realm could break the icy seal. It couldn't be broken by other kinds of force, let alone brute force. That was why Bob thought he could defeat Zen by using the icy seal. What is he? How could he break my icy seal? Bob felt as though he was going crazy. What had happened was an unprecedented blow to a proud man like him. Bob was sure that Zen could see through all his moves. Any counterattack by Zen could push him into the abyss of death. He didn't know what to do. Why can't I defeat him? I've never lost to anyone. Bob questioned himself. Bob was a proud man. It was his pride that made him improve in martial arts so quickly. He never allowed himself to lag behind others in any way. But at the moment, the fact that he had lost to Zen had destroyed his pride and self-respect, which plunged him into melancholy. At the thought of this, his eyes turned red, and the expression on his face grew ferocious. A wild voice shouted in his heart, "I will never allow myself to fail. Go to perdition." It was a fact that Bob had lost to Zen. The only way to rectify that was to kill Zen. Although Bob might not be able to kill Zen using his strength, as a child of a top 7 noble clan, he had an ultimate weapon with which to save his life. Bob dropped his sword and lifted his hand. A golden rune, namely, the golden holy rune, appeared in his palm. This was his ultimate weapon. The golden holy rune was small in size, but it cost the Pei clan a fortune to have it tattooed on Bob's hand. They had instructed Bob to use it only as a last resort. Bob's life was not in danger and Zen didn't intend to kill him, so there was no need for Bob to use the golden holy rune. Bob, however, was now in complete turmoil. He didn't want to reflect on and face his failure. He wanted to kill Zen. Only by killing Zen could Bob face himself. Just as Bob was about to raise his hand, Zen kicked him in the head. Zen had felt the horrible power contained in the golden holy rune. If Bob used it against him, Zen would either die or be seriously injured. A minor matter such as the fight between Bob and Zen was not reason enough to kill a person. So Zen thought that knocking the crazy man out was the best thing to do. After being kicked, Bob felt as though he could not see anything. He stumbled back a few steps and then fell to the ground. Oh my goodness, Bob is down, what are we going to do if he dies? At that moment, the disciples that had accompanied Bob shouted. All this while, they had remained silent. Each of these inner disciples was well respected. Some of them were members of noble clans, but they couldn't compare with the lineal descendants of the top 7 noble clans like Bob and Roger. So after Bob and Roger argued, they stood quietly. They knew what would happen if they got involved in a dispute between noble clans. Although they were hesitant to interfere in the fight between Bob and Roger, they were still worried about Bob. In their eyes, Zen and Roger couldn't match Bob at all. So they were very confident about this battle. However, none of them expected that Zen's counterattack would change the battle's outcome. Was Bob, a man who had reached the consummation of the nature level, so vulnerable to a man who had only reached the first grade of the nature level? This was crazy. As the inner disciples gazed at Bob who was lying motionless on the ground, they began to worry. However, as Zen stood next to Bob, they didn't dare to shout or approach him. Zen cast a cold glance at them and thought, these people are smart enough not to admonish me. If they dare to say anything, I'll never forgive them. Steward Cao, who was standing nearby, went silently to Bob to check on his injuries. He was relieved to see that Bob was all right. He realized that both Roger and Zen were not amateurs. Steward Cao slowly helped Bob up and handed him to the inner disciples who were with him. If ordinary disciples fought in Cloud Sect, then they would surely be expelled. This rule applied to members of ordinary noble clans as well. However, the disciples of the top 7 noble clans, especially a lineal descendant, had many privileges. The top 7 noble clans were the 7 pillars of the Burning Sky Empire. Although Cloud Sect claimed to treat all people fairly, this was not the case. After all, Cloud Sect was in the imperial capital of the Burning Sky Empire. So it would naturally give them numerous privileges. Cloud Sect would always turn a blind eye to influential people, such as Bob and Roger, as long as they didn't kill other disciples. Steward Cao was terrified by the incident. He did not expect that in this fight Zen would render Bob unconscious. When we parted ways at Dragon Fort, I didn't think that you would improve so much. You beat Bob, who has reached the consummation of the nature level. And to think that you are only at the first grade of the nature level. Roger still felt what had happened was incredible. I did make progress after leaving Dragon Fort, Zen said with a smile, but I can't match you. You are much better than me. Zen was talking about the difference in grades. Compared to Roger, Zen's progress in grades was really slow. From the time they left Dragon Fort to the present, Zen had progressed from being a half step into the nature level to the first grade of the nature level. Roger, on the other hand, had moved up to the 5th grade of the nature level in that short period, which surprised Zen. Zen was born in an ordinary family, and everything he had achieved was through his hard work. Therefore, his speed of improvement was not as fast. His strengths were all honed in actual combats. Ever since Roger returned from Dragon Fort, he started his retreat. A training tower had been dedicated to his retreat. Everything became easier in the tower. During the retreat, he had taken a variety of elixirs. The Meng clan knew that Roger was a smart man. So they gave preference to his cultivation and growth. Hence, it was not difficult for him to make tremendous progress in a short time. Roger shook his head and said, I did increase in terms of grades within the nature level, but I'm far worse than you when it comes to real strength. Grades were not equal to real strength. Every martial artist accepted this universal fact. Numerous people had reached a high level but had no real strength. Roger had reached the 5th grade of the nature level, but he still couldn't compete with Bob. While Zen, who had only reached the 1st grade, took Bob down easily. Clearly, Zen was much better than Roger. You're not an inner disciple. Roger was surprised to see Zen in a white robe. If a genius like Zen existed in other peaks, he would have been an inner disciple by now. Zen shook his head and said, No, I am not. Since entering Cloud Sect, Zen had spent very little time at the sect. He had used most of his time to accomplish other things and had ignored sect-related tasks completely. Zen didn't care if he became an inner disciple. Although he was just an outer disciple at Drizzle Peak, because of aura, his treatment was comparable to an inner disciple. Roger didn't know why Zen was still an outer disciple. In his opinion, the mentors at Drizzle Peak were just too stupid not to promote Zen. So he said, in that case, you might as well come to Daylily Peak. Chapter 175, The Report. Daylily Peak ranked 4th among the 33 peaks at Cloud Sect. As a result, it was a sought-after peak for the powerful clans. Moreover, most members of the Meng clan opted to cultivate at this mountain. If Zen chose to shift to Daylily Peak, no one would dare to make things hard for him. Besides, Zen could benefit a lot if he was transferred to the peak. Zen shook his head and said, thanks for the invitation. But I feel good at Drizzle Peak. Besides, it will not be easy for you to facilitate the transfer. I think it's unnecessary. To transfer Zen to Daylily Peak was more challenging than to reach outer space for an ordinary disciple. But it was a piece of cake for Roger. All he needed to do was to ask a favor from a member of his family to settle this matter. But Roger sensed that Zen had no intention of accepting his offer. As Zen had declined politely, Roger stopped trying to persuade him. However, Roger sighed and said, as you have not yet been promoted to inner disciple, I am afraid that you can't participate in the All Peaks competition. All Peaks competition? Zen's heart flipped when he heard Roger. Oh, don't you know that the All Peaks competition is around the corner? Roger asked curiously. Zen shook his head. He had heard about the All Peaks competition. It was held every 3 years at Cloud Sect. The results of the competition would decide the rankings of the 33 peaks. All the disciples attached great importance to the All Peaks competition as the rankings of the peaks would directly affect the assessment of the inner disciples and outer disciples, as well as various benefits attached. Most importantly, the interval between the competitions was 3 years. Almost every 3 years, some disciples would make an impression in the All Peaks competition and became the new shining stars. The All Peaks competition will be held as scheduled at the start of the next year. With your strength, I believe you will perform well. But you're not qualified to participate in the competition until you become an inner disciple of Drizzle Peak. After thinking for a while, Roger added, I don't know why Drizzle Peak hasn't promoted you to inner disciple yet. For outer disciples who want to ascend to inner disciple status, they need to participate in the annual inner disciple practice trial. But you have far exceeded the general outer disciples in regards to both strength and realm level. They should make an exception and promote you to inner disciple. If someone at Drizzle Peak is intentionally making things difficult for you, please tell me. Roger had overthought, and he did speak freely for Zen's benefit. It was indeed bizarre that Zen hadn't become an inner disciple with his strength. However, what Roger didn't know was that no one was trying to sabotage Zen's growth at Drizzle Peak. Zen nodded and showed his gratitude to Roger for his friendliness. He also told Roger that he would try to become an inner disciple as soon as possible so that he could qualify for the All Peaks competition. Zen would never miss such a good opportunity. By taking part in the All Peaks competition, not only could he test his strength, but it would also serve as a challenge for Zen in his pursuit of martial arts. Moreover, he could cut a striking figure in the All Peaks competition and win respect from everyone at Cloud Sect. Till now, the strength Zen had shown far exceeded that of his counterparts. However, ever since joining Cloud Sect, he either encountered conflicts with noble clans or irritated the saints at Cloud Sect. He needed an opportunity to show his progress and potential. And this competition was the perfect chance. He would surely grasp it as it was so important to him. Thank you for your support, Roger. I'm fine at Drizzle Peak. No one is trying to undermine me. I will definitely become an inner disciple before the All Peaks competition starts. To become an inner disciple was not a very difficult task for Zen. Seeing that Zen had no problem and seemed so confident, Roger nodded and said, but you offended Bob today. He will surely act against you. In fact, I stopped you at the beginning because I didn't want you to get involved in a dispute between noble clans. But now I'm afraid. Today, Zen kicked Bob and rendered him unconscious. This was certainly a great humiliation to Bob. Bob was a vengeful man, and he would not let it go easily. Zen had made another enemy for Roger's sake now. Upon hearing Roger, Zen laughed. Roger, I got into the fight, not because of the dispute between the Meng and Pei clans. Even if I had been a bystander, Bob would not let me go. Do you think I will let someone like him insult you? If Zen hadn't stepped out at the right time, Bob would have crushed Roger. Roger felt moved by Zen's words. All of a sudden, a sentiment surged to his chest that prompted him to say, okay. Forget it. There's no use dwelling on it. I feel so lucky to have a friend like you. Meng clan and Pei clan have always been on bad terms. If Bob wants to cause trouble for you, he needs to go through me first. The disputes among clans were tricky issues. As much as the members fought with swords and spears on the battleground, equally they would intentionally sabotage each other. If the Meng clan supported Zen, then members from other noble clans would consider consequences before hurting Zen. When at Dragon Fort, Roger had helped Zen, but he hadn't pledged the support of the Meng clan then. Today, Roger showed his firm support toward Zen. One could see that he considered Zen to be a true friend. Before Roger made this promise to Zen, he had thought it through. Bob was not the only person that Zen had offended. Previously, Zen had conflicts with the Zug clan. By offering his family's support, Roger knew that the Meng clan would risk offending the Zug clan. Nonetheless, Roger believed in Zen. Roger also believed that his decision was prudent. Zen knew that Roger was being sincere, but at the back of his heart, he only regarded Roger as a friend. He didn't have the slightest intention to attach himself to the powerful Meng clan by taking advantage of Roger. Since leaving the Luo clan, Zen had realized through numerous life and death battles that in this world, sometimes he could get a boost through the help of power and influence from others. However, such power and influence were never his own. He clearly knew that he still had to work hard to grow more powerful himself. Zen continued to concentrate on practice after leaving the Lake of Magical Fish. Although with his current strength, Zen could even beat any opponent at the consummation of nature level, he was still dissatisfied with his growth in the martial arts. But this was what he had to endure if he wanted to reach a higher level. From the half-step into the nature level to the nature level, there was an obstacle he needed to overcome. After he got through this process, the road ahead would be smoother for him. Although there was a small obstacle between the first grade and the second grade of the nature level, it was relatively less challenging to overcome. Every cultivator knew that several obstacles existed between levels and that each difficulty was different. The only thing a cultivator needed was a good environment for practice. For example, to refine in the Lake of the Magical Fish, the point one had to consume was beyond the standard that a normal person could bear. This was expensive even for a person like Zen. He didn't have many points left in his disciple card, and they could only support him to practice about 18 hours in the Lake of the Magical Fish. In the following days, Zen visited the Lake of the Magical Fish to practice for 2 hours every day. The first time that Zen dived into the Lake of the Magical Fish, he reached about 130 meters in depth. At that level, he would encounter murlocs whose bodies were completely dull red. The red murlocs were huge. Even their eyes would glow red in the darkness. Once they started moving, the water would be stirred by their huge bodies. Although Zen was able to shake them off temporarily, the number of murlocs at that depth was overwhelming. Even if Zen managed to ditch one murloc, several more would come for Zen. One day, Zen tried to force a breakthrough, but unfortunately, he was besieged by the red murlocs. He had no choice but to return to the surface. Cao felt almost numb about Zen's performance in the Lake of the Magical Fish. Zen had reached the 130 meters depth, and this was the highest record he had till now. If Zen continued to dive deeper and reach 150 meters or 180 meters, then he would break the record of other disciples at Cloud Sect. The stewards of the Cloud Sect, especially those in charge of the practice realms, had an additional responsibility to record and report activities in the places that they guarded. Zen's performance was eligible to be reported to the top executives. In this way, the top leaders would pay more attention to him or even give him more resources for practice as a reward. Thinking of this, Cao recorded Zen's performance and submitted the file to the top leaders. If they saw the record and intended to cultivate Zen, Cao would be rewarded for discovering talent. Cao assumed that an extraordinary talent like Zen would definitely catch the leader's eyes. It was true that there were already numerous talented disciples at Cloud Sect, and there was no lack of prodigies. However, as the Cloud Sect was large in its scale, it was always thirsty for more talents to join. However, to Cao's surprise, his report seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. It turned out that no one from the top was paying any attention to Zen. To Cao's knowledge, this was impossible. He suspected that his report had gone missing somewhere and that perhaps the top leaders hadn't seen it. With such a thought, Cao submitted another report. The result was the same as the last time. There was no response or any news from the top leaders. At Cloud Sect, it was not easy to get a position as a steward. Cao was a very smart man. He soon figured out the reason. I submitted the report twice, but there is no feedback from the top. This only means one thing, that the top leaders are giving Zen the cold shoulders deliberately, Cao thought. But as to who was behind all this and what was the person's intention, Cao didn't bother to think further. No matter who the person was, Cao was not in a position to worry. He was only an obscure steward, and he couldn't afford to offend anyone at Cloud Sect. Thus, he gave up the idea of claiming the credit of discovering talent. Chapter 176, The Evil Plan. In Lake Mountain, Cloud Sect. Hidden deep in the center of Cloud Sect was Lake Mountain. The way up to the top was steep, and made harder by that fact that there was no path up to the mountain. It was impossible to climb it without any equipment. People at the Illuminating Soul Realm could fly to get to the top of Lake Mountain, while the rest could get there with the help of a flying chariot. Despite the perilous travel, there were many glorious buildings on top of Lake Mountain. There was no doubt that it took a lot of trouble to transport the building materials all the way up to the mountain summit. A beautiful lake surrounded Lake Mountain, which only added more to its scenic beauty. People could have a good view of the wonderful scenery if they stood on top of the mountain, which was also a good way to relax the senses. Many of Cloud Sect's saints lived on the elusive Lake Mountain. A long, narrow pavilion was situated at one corner of Lake Mountain. Half of the pavilion was perched firmly on the cliff, while its other half was cantilevered over the edge. A great part of the pavilion was cantilevered and hung in the air. If an acrophobic person stood on the pavilion, he would surely shiver with fear. The fragrant scent of tea wafted pleasantly in the air. An old man with a purple hat on brought the cup of tea to his lips, which was decorated with spun gold, and took a sip. The old man was Saint Zara, one of the top 10 saints of Cloud Sect. As he sipped on the hot drink, a stream of bright light suddenly passed over the sky and traversed closer to him. After a moment, another old man appeared at the edge of the pavilion. It was Saint Vienna, who ranked 10th out of the top 10 saints of Cloud Sect. The gust of wind from Saint Vienna's descent nearly overturned the tea set on the desk. "Vienna, why do you break in full fury?" Zara asked with a frown. Every saint had lived for hundreds of years. As they got older, they became calmer when facing different situations. However, Vienna was different. He had always been ill-tempered for so many years. An eyebrow slightly raised itself up to Vienna's forehead. "Well, Zara, do you know what I have found out? The identity of Zen, who was on the court trial last time, surprises me a lot." Vienna hissed. Saint Zara put his cup down and turned to look at him. "Zen, does it matter who he really is?" he asked. This made him a bit confused. A few days ago, several saints got upset because the princess got angry at them just for Zen's sake. But that was a done deal, so they just let it go at that. "His last name is Luo. Did you forget about the genius girl, who was from C County and was brought to the court trial 2 years ago?" Saint Vienna reminded him. Something clicked in Saint Zara's head, and then he spoke. Yan. The name was still clear as ever in Saint Zara's mind. He had lived for hundreds of years, but never had he come across any disciple who was as talented as Yan. Her last name was also Luo. Could it be that? Did you mean to say that Yan was related to Zen? The question smoothly rolled out of Saint Zara's tongue as he thought about it. Saint Vienna nodded and said, "That is exactly what I'm thinking." The twinkling eyes of Saint Zara glanced at the tea set. "Well, the Luo family isn't a big family, not even a noble one. But there are 2 outstanding talents in their family, it is amazing," Saint Zara quipped with a smile. There were also many exceptional people in Cloud Sect, and their abilities greatly varied from each other. However, supremely excellent talents like Yan and Zen were rarely seen. After a short pause, Saint Zara continued to ask, "But even if it is true, so what?" As opposed to Saint Vienna, Saint Zara thought little of the matter. Many things had inevitably vanished like smoke as time passed by. Such was the way of life. Cloud Sect had lots of descendants, and talents were not new to the saints. Why doesn't it matter? Zen is coming for his sister. He wants to save her. I found out that he had gone to Perdition Mountain. I guess he wants to take Yan out. Saint Vienna exclaimed. However, Saint Zara still appeared unperturbed by the matter. Yan is Zen's sister. It is human nature that Zen wants to help Yan out of Torture Mountain. But I don't think it is easy for him to make it. Saint Zara commented with a shake of his head. Then, he picked up the rosewood teapot and poured a stream of golden tea into his teacup. Meanwhile, Saint Vienna was still quite bothered. "I won't have it. Zen is a gifted man, but he is also evil. He is practicing Heavenly Ogre Fist now. Once he succeeds in it, it is no doubt that he will work hard to figure out what we have done to Yan. I believe he won't let us off easily if he knows the truth." So we must destroy him while he isn't powerful enough. Worry had noticeably shaken Saint Vianna right now. He was different from Saint Zara. Saint Zara had never fought with Zen, but he had. That one day when he tried to subdue Zen by using Fatal Palm, Zen had successfully stopped him. Zen had just reached the nature level at that time, but he was powerful enough to stop Saint Vianna. Saint Vianna was quite astonished by the strange phenomenon. After that, he poked his nose into the matter, and then he found out that when Zen entered the Heavenly Library, he had taken the hidden book, Heavenly Ogre Fist. To his surprise, Zen had successfully learned the skill. It was true that Zen was just at the nature level now, but his learning capacity was vast and powerful. If he reached Illuminating Soul Realm, would it be quite possible for him to defeat Saint Vianna? If he went through Cloud Road someday, and was elected by Cloud Hall, then he could do anything to Saint Vianna if he wished. What Saint Vianna worried about deserved attention. The person Zen cared about the most was Yan, and he most definitely wouldn't allow anyone to harm her. That fateful day on Commandment Mount, when Zen got the news that it were Saint Vianna, Saint Adrian, and other saints who poisoned Yan in Hell Mountain, he wanted to kill them all then and there. However, he wasn't powerful enough back then, so he could only restrain himself. After Saint Zara finished his tea, he gently waved his sleeves and the tea set on the table completely disappeared. What you have said is reasonable. However, there are many talents in the world, but only few of them could become quite strong, Saint Zara said. He had thought otherwise. Cloud Sect had hundreds of thousands of disciples and at least 10,000 of them were talented, but only few of them could really be the strong. Is that so? Have you ever seen anyone who was at the nature level successfully escape from my fatal palm? Saint Vianna shot back. Well, Saint Zara couldn't find the next words to complete his sentence. He was completely lost for words. When Saint Vianna had first told Saint Zara that Zen had blocked his attack, he didn't believe it at all. It was hard for him to be convinced if he didn't see it with his own eyes. However, Saint Vianna had said it so surely that he was compelled to believe it. If Zen was really so talented, once he became stronger, it would be bad for Cloud Sect because he hated Cloud Sect very much. For the sake of Cloud Sect, Saint Zara must think about how to deal with Zen. When Zen practiced in Lake of the Magical Fish for the first time, he could dive to a depth of more than 100 meters. Have you ever seen anyone who only reached grade 1 nature level was capable of achieving it? Saint Vianna asked again. Silence hung in the air. Once again, Saint Zara could only shake his head. What Zen had done did surprise him a lot. The steward who guards the deep pool has reported that Zen deserved some rewards in Cloud Sect's help, but I refuse it. Saint Vianna hissed. But it couldn't stop him. I am thinking that I should suppress him by cruel means. He added. What do you mean by cruel means? Saint Zara asked. He wasn't as proactive as Saint Vianna, but he was much calmer than him. Sometimes, it made him come up with some wonderful suggestions. After having thought about it seriously, he suggested, there is a good way for us to suppress Zen. His companion raised one eyebrow in mild interest. What is it? Saint Vianna asked. All peaks competition, Saint Zara said slowly. If someone wanted to rise and be recognized in Cloud Sect, then being the champion of all peaks competition was a good way to achieve it. The saints knew that Zen was outer disciple and that he had no right to take part in the all peaks competition, but they were more sure that if Zen wanted to become an inner disciple, then he could make it. The saints were capable of killing Zen in a variety of ways. However, they dreaded that Aura, who recklessly protected Zen, might be aggravated if they did so. Aura had the Emperor on her side, and the saints clearly knew how powerful the Emperor was. If the saints secretly killed Zen, there would be some traces that would inevitably be left behind. It would be easy for Aura to track down the saints by following the clues, which might put them in a dangerous situation. However, killing Zen in the All Peaks competition was different. All the disciples of Cloud Sect would take part in All Peaks competition to try to get a good position on the Cloud Sect list. The competition was not only about the ranking of the peaks, but also about the reputation and the ranking of the disciples themselves. It was a normal thing for some people to get killed in the battle ring of the All Peaks competition. In every battle ring of All Peaks competition, there were always some people who got out of control and killed their opponents. If Zen was killed in such a way, even Aura knew that it were the saints who had arranged for it, she wouldn't be able to find any reason to look into what they had done. In such a way, the saints could secretly achieve their goal. Saint Zara only mentioned All Peaks competition, but it was enough for Saint Vianna to understand what he meant. Playing tricks in all peaks competition was an advisable way to kill Zen. But Saint Vianna was still a bit puzzled, and he asked, what if Zen is unwilling to take part in all peaks competition? Zen was already qualified to become an inner disciple, hence he would also be allowed to take part in the all peaks competition if he wanted to. However, what if Zen was unwilling to become an inner disciple and showed no interest in the all peaks competition? If that was the case, then they couldn't implement their plan. It is impossible that Zen doesn't want to become an inner disciple. Aura has tried her best to train Zen, and it is her hope that Zen could get a good ranking in the all peaks competition. Besides, compared to the other 32 peaks, Drizzle Peak is the tail ender. I believe that Zen wants to improve the situation, Saint Zara said. He was sure that this was the case for Zen. Well, you are right, but who should be sent to kill Zen? I should think about it seriously, Saint Vianna said. A brittle laugh escaped his lips. It was impossible for him to tolerate being offended by Zen, who was such a young man. He wouldn't allow it. Then again, Zen was overqualified, so choosing someone who could kill him in the all peaks competition would be a handful. However, there were still many masters in Cloud Sect, and Saint Vianna would definitely be able to pick someone who was suitable for the task. Chapter 177, Kite Skydeck. While sitting up straight in the room, cross-legged, he eyed the sun moon stars picture before him with the utmost attention. These past few days, he had not been to the Lake of the Magical Fish, as his points were just not enough. It was during his journey to the south when he collected most of his points. After he killed the Blade Locusts and acquired the crystal core from the Queen Blade Locust, the points he had obtained became the envy of all the outer disciples of Cloud Sect. Indeed, thousands of points was a huge number for any outer disciple. It did not cost him much if he only used them for some healing drugs and vitality cultivation elixir, which could help him in the practice. Even when he went to the Heavenly Library once, it only took him 100 points. However, if an inner disciple used these points for practice, they could last for 10 days or half a month at most. If truth be told, Cloud Sect's points and rewards system was actually more than practical. If one wanted to go to the certain places where he could practice and improve his strength rapidly, he had to help the Cloud Sect accomplish many tasks. Then, the points they obtained from the tasks could be used in practice again. In the beginning, he had hoped to earn millions of points in a short time. However, after enduring many things, he now realized how naive he had been. The reality was, he did not only have to earn points, but he also had to use them to do other things. If things were to carry on at such a slow speed, collecting millions of points was going to be impossible. Besides obtaining the points through accomplishing tasks, there was another way, which was to buy points with cubic crystals. Usually, 2 cubic crystals could buy 1 point. At the moment, Zen had around 20,000 cubic crystals. If he decided to bargain them for points, he could receive 10,000 Cloud Sect points. Even though 10,000 points sounded like it was a lot, that particular amount would not last long if used for practice in the Lake of the Magical Fish. With the rise of the depth in which Zen had leapt into the lake, the time it took would also accordingly increase. It took 200 points for 2 hours of practice in the Lake of the Magical Fish. If he had to practice for 4 hours each day, then he had to pay 400 points on a daily basis. That meant that 10,000 points would only last him for less than a month. Other than the cubic crystals, Zen also had over 600 drops of heavenly essence. From the spiritual weapons he had acquired, he extracted over 1,000 drops of heavenly essence. Nevertheless, he had not used all the heavenly essence in the dragon sculpture, he had over 600 drops left with him. In the past, 50 drops of heavenly essence with unknown sources were traded for as high as 120,000 cubic crystals at the Blessed Auction House. Therefore, if his heavenly essence could be sold at that price as well, then he could gain over 1 million cubic crystals at the auction. However, the law of supply and demand controlled the commodities' prices. Heavenly essence was a good thing, and it was a precious treasure without a doubt, particularly for those weapon refiners. Normally, finding and getting them only occurred with a bit of luck. If 600 drops of heavenly essence appeared in the market all of a sudden, the price could decrease due to the high amount of supply. In that case, the rate of 50 drops could not be 120,000 cubic crystals. Besides, Zen had the black fire that could help him gain more heavenly essence whenever he wanted. On the other hand, it was impossible to bargain so much at once. I will sell 50 drops in a bottle one at a time, Zen decided after a bit of contemplation. Simultaneously, he wanted to entrust the heavenly essence to Worth who could sell it. For a long time, not knowing whom to entrust them with troubled him before. On top of that, he was also unsure whether to disguise himself if he ever handed over the heavenly essence to someone. It became clear over time to ask Worth to sell them for him, as it was possible that the man would only assume that Zen got them by chance. Although, asking Worth for the second or third time was surely going to raise suspicions. Zen knew the saying, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth, all too well. If anyone discovered that he had the ability to create heavenly essence, he could get into a lot of trouble. Although a lot of misfortune seemed to surround him already, he still hoped to attract less trouble as possible. Other than Worth, however, Zen could not think of anyone else whom he could trust with such a delicate favor. Worth and I are good friends, he thought. It is a good thing he is helping me sell the heavenly essence. His family is very rich, so I assume that he would not take advantage or do any harm to me. As the saying went, love your neighbor, yet do not lower your defenses. At the end of the day, it did not hurt Zen to be cautious. As soon as he came up with a good excuse, he left and headed for Worth's residence. When he reached his destination though, he could not find the man anywhere. After asking someone around the house, he found out Worth was not in his room, and that he had gone to the drizzle side peak to practice. Without wasting another moment, Zen went to the side peak to look for him. Among the many side peaks of Drizzle Peak, intensive training became the central purpose for several of them. Although these side peaks paled in comparison to the guarded cultivation places in Cloud Sect, at the very least, these practice spots were free to the disciples of the Drizzle Peak. As it turned out, Kite Skydeck was one of the practice places in Drizzle side peaks. To go to the Kite Skydeck from the Drizzle main peak, one had to pass a treacherous mountain road. As the path was really a vertical cliff, it was practically inaccessible. There were wooden piles firmly thrust into the cliff by Illumination Soul Realm Masters. Usually, they stepped on the piles to cross the cliff and reach the other end. Cowardly inner disciples would probably shudder at the sight of the bottomless chasm below the cliff and did not dare to cross it. Standing in front of the cliff, Zen glanced at the Kite Skydeck not far away, and then he jumped onto the piles without batting an eyelid. The treacherous cliff seemed very dangerous judging by its appearance alone, but if one were brave enough, falling down would be out of the question. After running at full speed for a few minutes, Zen reached the top of the Kite Skydeck. As he had heard that Worth often went there to practice nowadays, he thought that he would find him there. Panting heavily, Worth's huge body quivered with each abrupt gasp he took. Beads of sweat dripped down his cheeks, drenching his white robe all over. Although people who were out of shape tended to be lazy, Worth was quite an exception. On the contrary, he trained rigorously and so few people could match the efforts he put in each practice. The Kite Skydeck was situated on a round side peak, and the towering main peak just stood on the right. On the side of the main peak that faced the Kite Skydeck was a steep mountain cliff. Its surface was very smooth as if a knife had cut it. There was almost no way for one to grasp and climb up. Worth was wearing a heavy load suit, which was completely made of lead. It weighed over 1,000 pounds. Taking a deep breath, he began to sprint towards the edge of the cliff. Bang, bang, bang. His heavy body in the heavy load suit caused a dull thud with his every step. When he approached the edge, he drew a deep breath, leapt towards the cliff, and then he began to climb his way up. Despite it being very smooth and with nothing he could hold onto, his resilient momentum made it possible to lug his heavy body as he quickly rushed upward. On the cliff, one could easily see visible red paint marks with numbers indicating the height, 5 meters, 10 meters, 15 meters, 20 meters, and etc. With Worth rising higher upward the cliff, he quickly passed the 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters marks, and finally, he did not slow down until he reached 30 meters where his strength wore off. It was only then when his plump body began to slide downwards. 30 seems to be my limit, Worth thought to himself and shook his head in disappointment. Such a test should be taken seriously. It could demonstrate one's speed in sprint, strength, and response time. The top mark on the cliff was 55 meters. Rumors claimed there was once an outer disciple who had reached 55 meters. It was the highest record among the outer disciples in the Drizzle Peak. The outer disciple who had set the record smashed hard on the place where he reached with his palm, leaving a deep handprint. So far, no one had ever surpassed the point marked by the handprint. Nevertheless, this record was only within the outer disciples of the Drizzle Peak. If the nature creatures from the inner disciples of the Drizzle Peak came to challenge the record, they could definitely exceed the current top record. As soon as Worth slid down to the ground, an agile figure rushed onto the cliff. The thin man was as agile as a monkey. He clung to the cliff and climbed up like a gecko. Sprinting at full speed, he quickly exceeded the height that Worth had just reached and passed 40 meters. Even after passing the 40 meters mark, he maintained the same strength and took another leap. It was not until when he reached 45 meters that his strength dwindled and he began to fall. The lanky outer disciple sneered at Worth with a tint of derision. Upon witnessing the man's triumph, Worth could do nothing but stare back with his fierce round eyes. The lanky outer disciple, whose name was Wyatt Wu, joined the Drizzle Peak last year. Although his strength ranked 11th among the outer disciples of Drizzle Peak, he was still behind Worth. Due to his small figure, his agility came as a bit of a surprise. His performance had exceeded many people's expectations during his practice there. In general, Wyatt usually reached over 40 meters to 45 meters at most. However, today he just effortlessly surpassed 45 meters, and almost hit a new record by getting to 46 meters. It seemed that Wyatt had made further progress in improving his strength. It was highly possible that none of the outer disciples of the Drizzle Peak could reach 46 meters, let alone surpass Wyatt. Truthfully, as a man from a rich and influential family, Worth could inherit his family trade in the future. Even though he was only a common warrior with bone refining level, he could someday give orders to the masters of nature level. As the saying went, money makes the world go round. To command nature creatures, he only needed to pay more. It was a piece of cake for the Zhang clan. The descendants of the Zhang clan possessed half of the head for a business genius, as well as sharp insight. On the other hand, when it came to the talent for cultivation, they were far behind the descendants of the 7 noble clans. However, Worth was a disciplined man. Ever since he joined the Cloud Insect and the Drizzle Peak, his goal was to keep practicing until he made the breakthrough and became a nature creature. As soon as Worth prepared to sprint for the second time, Zen suddenly appeared on the kite skydeck before him to block his only path and broke the man's concentration. Chapter 178. Zen's Incredible Jump. Worth, Zen called from a distance. Zen, what are you doing here? Worth asked, wiping the sweat from his face. He didn't know why Zen decided to suddenly visit the kite skydeck. Although Zen had just joined the Drizzle Peak a few months ago, he had already upgraded from marrow refining level to nature level. He became more powerful than any of those outer disciples from Drizzle Peak, and with this, he could be an inner disciple soon. With Zen's current level in the Drizzle Peak, it wasn't necessary for him to go to Kite Skydeck for cultivation. The other outer disciples of Drizzle Peak immediately cast their eyes to Zen when they heard Worth call his name. Zen had become famous in Drizzle Peak with the improvement of his cultivation, and his name would make heads turn. The outer disciple named Wyatt was distracted upon hearing the name Zen, and his eyes suddenly went ablaze. Wyatt was a gifted and persistent practitioner. But because he had been born in an ordinary family, he had gone through trials and tribulations in the cultivation process in Cloud Sect. Being discriminated because of his family roots, he always wanted to prove himself by defeating others. But he had no interest in challenging a practitioner like Worth. The person he wanted to challenge the most was Zen, and defeating him was the only significant victory for Wyatt. Unfortunately, it was impossible for him to defeat Zen now. He had just reached the half step into the nature level, while Zen was already a nature creature. Wyatt had been cultivating on Kite Skydeck for a long time, so he thought that Zen would be no match for him if he challenged the latter to a climbing competition. When Zen was talking to Worth, Wyatt came up to him in a suit weighing 1,000 pounds. Then he gestured at Zen for a challenge before turning around and rushing to the cliff wall. Wyatt gave his all and climbed like a monkey. Swiftly, he ascended from the ground. After a short time, he had ascended from 10 meters to 47 meters. Wyatt didn't look down and continued to ascend without slipping. Reaching 47 meters was his best record by far. After reaching that height, he carefully slid down from the cliff, looking down at Zen with defiant eyes. As soon as he reached the ground, he came over to Zen and asked, "Do you want to try your luck? Look, there's a handprint on the wall of the cliff." It's said that the handprint was left by the most powerful inner disciple of our Drizzle Peak. Wyatt knew that Zen had just upgraded from a half step into the nature level practitioner to a nature creature. Furthermore, the biggest difference between a nature creature and a half step into the nature level practitioner was the life energy, not the corporeal body. So Wyatt thought that Zen could neither surpass the height of the handprint left by that inner disciple nor reach the height that he just climbed. Climbing the cliff didn't only require strength, but also the flexibility of one's body. The timing was also another significant factor. Since Zen hadn't tried this for once, he would have a hard time on this challenge. Looking at Wyatt's arrogant face, Worth couldn't help but feel disgusted. He knew that Wyatt only wanted Zen to look stupid in front of all the other disciples. Although Zen had made great progress in his cultivation, Worth was worried that Zen would fail because it was his first time to climb a cliff. To save his friend from the embarrassment, he pulled Zen and said, "Zen, leave him alone. Let's have tea in the pavilion over there and catch up." Zen didn't want to waste time on such a trivial challenge, so he agreed with Worth. But just as he was about to leave for the pavilion, Wyatt suddenly said, "Hey, where are you going? You're not threatened by me, are you? How can a coward like you be called the best outer disciple in Drizzle Peak?" Zen wasn't aware that he gained such title, but even so, he didn't care much for any titles or prestige at all. Surprised by Wyatt's remark, Zen turned around and shrugged. "I'm not scared. I'm not just up for this childish stuff. But if you insist, then I guess there's no harm in trying. I don't get enough free time, so I guess it's a good chance to relax," he said. "Zen, I don't think that's a good idea," Worth tried to stop him. He had climbed this cliff before, so he knew that even though it looked easy, the cliff's surface was smooth and there was nothing to step or hold on to. One would need extra effort and familiarity of the cliff to successfully climb it. However, since Zen hadn't climbed it before, he would be at a disadvantage. Zen waved his hand to cut Worth off. "Worth, don't worry about me. I have nothing to lose if I fail. I don't care about any title or prestige of being the best disciple. I would even gladly give it to someone who wants it," he said and chuckled lightly. Hearing that, Worth was certain that Zen had already made up his mind and there was nothing he could do to stop him. "I don't know about this, but Zen might have a chance of winning," Worth thought to himself. Zen had always succeeded at any obstacles he faced. He would always overcome a difficult situation even when nobody thought he could succeed. Worth laughed and said, "You're right, there's nothing to lose if you try. It's not important how high you can reach." He made sure to say that out loud that the rest of the disciples could hear it. This way, Zen wouldn't be ashamed even if he could not successfully climb the cliff. "This suit weighs 1,000 pounds. But you can also try some lesser weight grade. We have the suits of 100 pounds, 500 pounds, and 800 pounds. Which one do you prefer?" Wyatt asked sarcastically as he took off his heavy load suit and lifted it in his hand. Although he had given Zen some options, he stressed that he wore the heaviest suit so that Zen would feel the pressure. It would look fair if Zen would choose the same weight grade as his. "It's your first climb on this cliff, so it's okay if you choose the lightest weight grade," Worth convinced Zen. But to his surprise, Zen took the suit from Wyatt's hand and put it onto himself and jumped like a light feather. Zen felt a little bit of pressure of the heavy loaded suit, but with his current strength, this weight meant nothing to him. Even without the power from the dragon scales, he could completely ignore the weight of the heavy load suit. Zen walked up to the runway of the cliff and measured the distance from where he stood to the cliff. "Zen, you can do it," Worth shouted beside him. Zen nodded. He then took a deep breath and dashed forward the foot of the cliff. The height he could climb depended on his momentum and strength. The faster he ran and greater his strength, the higher he could climb. Although he was not considering this a competition, he was still serious about it. Even if it was a way to relax, he was still giving his all to this challenge. Giving his all in everything he would do was Zen's philosophy in life. As he dashed towards the cliff, he activated the Phoenix crystal in his right arm. Phew! Zen was suddenly surrounded by a thin barrier which was formed by the energy released from the Phoenix crystal. The barrier kept the wind out and removed the resistance as Zen ran. The other outer disciples showed great interest when they heard Zen was going to attend the climbing test on Kite Skydeck. He was regarded as the best outer disciple of the Drizzle Park, so everyone wanted to see what was so special about him and whether he was as powerful as what they said he was. All of the disciples stopped what they were doing and stood there to watch. They were watching carefully when Zen suddenly appeared blur with his speed and motion. "Oh my goodness, he is really fast. How can he do that? It's unbelievable. He moves so fast that I can't even see him. I wonder how high he can go. Do you think he can pass the height of the handprint? Who knows?" The buzz of conversation grew. All the disciples couldn't even blink their eyes in fear of losing track of the running disciple. Zen hadn't used his full strength. If he did, the other disciples wouldn't see him with their naked eyes. This wasn't only to test his speed and strength, but also his control ability on timing. If he went on full speed, he could hit the wall. He had to adjust his speed and motion so he could leap up the wall swiftly. Since it was his first attempt on this, he was just relying on his instincts. As he approached the foot of the cliff, he pressed his feet hard on the ground, bent his knees, and pushed himself upward. He zoomed upward at an incredibly high speed. He just bounced off the ground, and his feet hadn't even touched the cliff wall. Worth was so surprised that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. He couldn't blink and talk because of the intensity of the challenge. He is not stepping on the cliff wall. How could he even keep that momentum from bouncing off the ground? He wondered. Technically, in order to climb higher, the disciples would have to push on the cliff wall with their hands and feet so that the rebound force could be produced. But to everyone's surprise, Zen had reached the 20 meters mark with just the momentum from his initial jump. He is such a freak. How could he climb dozens of meters only relying on his bounce? I don't know what to say. God is so unfair. I don't even want to live after I found the gap between him and me. Wyatt was looking on in the crowd. He said coldly, one can't climb the cliff wall merely by bouncing off the ground. Let's say he could reach the first 20 meters by his initial jump, but he would certainly fall off later when his momentum reduces. Look, he is finally slowing down. With one bounce, Zen had reached the height of 27 meters. Now that his upward momentum started to fade away, he began to climb the cliff wall with the use of his hands and feet. After his hands landed on the wall, Zen was surprised to realize that the wall was so smooth that he couldn't even find a place to apply force. Chapter 179, More Heavenly Essence. In fact, there were points of the mountain wall that remained strong. The disciples from Drizzle Peak climbed the mountain wall continuously. Wherever other disciples tramped, there were marks left behind. As time went on, tiny hollows were etched into the mountain wall. As some disciples practiced more, they discovered these hollows, and using them, they could climb higher. Some hollows were used frequently, and they gradually sunk. Viewed from below, the wall appeared smooth and flat, but in reality, it had many recesses. After climbing its face hundreds of times, some disciples could remember each hollow. They needed to pay attention to where it was safe to tread the first few steps after they made the leap. So, the experience in climbing this mountain wall was very important. Zen didn't have the experience and climbed it with just his strength. It was believed he would surely suffer losses. Wyatt was able to reach a height of 47 meters because he was nimble and made good use of the recesses. From ancient to modern times, the people who could reach the summit was far less than those who initially set out climbing, so the higher one went, the fewer recesses in the face of the wall. They were also more indistinct and difficult to find, the higher one scaled. Zen lacked the experience to find the niches in the mountain wall, but he had an advantage: speed. The Phoenix Crystal's energy played an important role. He slapped the mountain wall with both hands continuously while at the same time he tramped his feet into the surface quickly. Zen was well aware that with the strength he currently possessed, he could slice into the hard mountain wall easily and catapult himself up to the top. But if he did that, it would be considered cheating, so he decided against it. Zen could control his strength in a manner that it was imperceptible to see, and as he slapped and tramped non-stop, his speed was once more quickened, unexpectedly. Wow, look at Zen's speed increase again unexpectedly. My gosh, shouted one of the outer disciples. Seriously, how'd that happen? It's beyond reason, commented some of the outer disciples in confusion. Normally, when disciples climbed the mountain wall, the higher they went, the slower they became. At the bottom, the disciples would be at their strongest and speediest, and then because there was no place they could apply their force to at the midway, speed decreased, making the climb upward grow slower and slower. Nobody could change the rules of relativity. However, halfway up the wall, Zen's speed suddenly increased. What did that mean? It meant Zen didn't need to store his force when he was at the bottom. He was even able to skip the dashing to accelerate. He could climb the mountain wall with the same stamina, whether he went 30 meters, 100 meters or even 1,000 meters. It didn't seem to make a difference to him whether he climbed the mountain wall or ran on flat ground. Given the information, this test to climb the mountain wall had no real impact on Zen. First Zen passed the 30 meters mark, then 40, and accelerating as he went, he reached 55 meters and continued. Soon enough, he'd gone further than the palm print. Stopping at 60 meters, Zen stretched his hand to pound the mountain wall. Smash! After battering at the stone surface until a deep handprint became visible, Zen turned and fell straight down. He's made a new record when he climbed for the first time. He's a nature creature and certainly different from us. It's not a matter of him being a nature creature. The fact is, I've seen powerful inner disciples take the test, and although they reached 60 meters, it didn't go smoothly and they weren't anywhere near as fast as Zen. Right, what other people have accomplished means nothing to Zen. If he wanted to, he could climb the mountain wall as easily as strolling across flat ground. While the other disciples were discussing Zen, he reached the bottom and approached Wyatt. While walking, he removed the weight-bearing suit and handed it to Wyatt, smiling as he commented, "I didn't do a very good job." Wyatt's expression remained stiff and bitter. He wasn't just the outer disciple at Drizzle Peak who was ranked number 1, but he was also a fairly abnormal person. Nobody could find an outer disciple among all peaks of the Cloud sect, let alone at Drizzle Peak, who could rival him. Which begged the question, why was Zen still an outer disciple? Challenging Zen this way was like him asking to be insulted. Wyatt felt a deep sense of frustration. After delivering the weight-bearing suit back to Wyatt, Zen went over to Worth and patted his shoulder. Worth reacted deliberately with an exaggeratedly startled expression, but after Zen patted him, he had a smile on his face and laughed wildly as he said, "Ha ha. I knew you would succeed. Zen, but, wow, you didn't just make it, did you?" While he praised Zen, Worth glanced from time to time over in Wyatt's direction. Zen had helped Worth vent his anger. When he thought about Wyatt's earlier expression, Worth had become enraged. Given his station, Worth didn't need to be annoyed about a warrior who was merely a half-step into the nature level, especially one who hailed from a poor family. He didn't take disciples who completed the nature level seriously, let alone one who was merely at half-step into the nature level. The Zhang clan wasn't powerful, but its wealth was famous throughout all of the eastern region. Customarily, only a few of the disciples from the Cloud sect were able to enter the illuminating soul realm, and most of those masters were from distinguished noble clans. Of course, it was impossible for noble clans to have all the advantages, and there were always a few rare talents from impoverished families. Most of the masters in the illuminating soul realm whose families were common went to work as officials for the Zhang clan. Those officials who had reached the illuminating soul realm answered directly to the Zhang clan. It was the reason that while the Zhang clan wasn't among the top 7 noble clans, it was able to advance alongside any of them, at an equal pace. Since Worth was the third son of the Zhang clan, even the officials at the illuminating soul realm respected him. So, he didn't need to take Wyatt into account. Being inherently robust, Worth enjoyed immersing himself in studying martial arts presently, even though he didn't plan on going that far. Having been crushed many times by Wyatt had left Worth feeling enraged. So, even though he didn't personally defeat Wyatt, it thrilled Worth to have Zen's assistance venting his anger. Worth walked over to the pavilion alongside Zen, and then they sat on a stone bench. Cloud sect boasted a beautiful scenery and Kite Skydeck flanked Drizzle Peak, which had an amazing view of the mountain to the west that they could watch. "Zen, you specifically came here today. What is it that you want?" asked Worth. A quick thinker, Worth guessed that Zen owned something valuable that he wanted to commission Worth to sell at auction. However, propriety kept him from blurting that out and he feigned ignorance. Zen nodded and replied, "Worth, I do want you to help me with something. But, I hope you can keep it under wraps for me, for now." Worth gave Zen a deep, meaningful look as he said, "Zen, you are like a brother to me. You don't need to ask me to keep it a secret. Regardless of what it is, I won't tell anybody, even if someone is to try and kill me." Zen chuckled, feeling rather embarrassed and said, "I know, I worry too much. Please, forgive me, Worth. I know you're reliable, and I just overanalyze things." "No worries, Zen. It's always best to be cautious. You've piqued my curiosity now, and it makes me believe you want to commission me to sell something very important for you," said Worth eagerly. He knew Zen wasn't short-sighted and wouldn't tell him to make such a promise unless it was of great importance. Last time, it was a crystal core of fire scorpion lion that Zen commissioned Worth to sell, but, at the time, Zen didn't act as seriously as he did now. Worth wondered if what Zen had now was much more valuable than a crystal core of fire scorpion lion. Seeing the curiosity etched into Worth's face prompted Zen to tap his space ring lightly. He opened it, and pulled a small cup from it. Nobody was near them at the pavilion, and even if someone were to see it, it was highly unlikely any of the outer disciples from Drizzle Peak possessed the knowledge to recognize the substance that was in the cup. However, Zen still covered it covertly with his hand before handing it over to Worth. As Worth stared at what was in the cup, his eyes widened, and in a hushed tone with a hint of surprise, he whispered, "Heavenly essence." When Zen had the crystal core at auction, someone was selling some heavenly essence. Worth still recalled at the time that the heavenly essence netted 120,000 cubic crystals. If one of the bidders hadn't given up and stopped bidding, the price of the heavenly essence would probably have kept rising in cost, to what could only be imagined. "It appears that you have at least as much heavenly essence as what sold at the blessed auction house last time we were there. How many drops do you have here?" asked Worth, his voice trembling in excitement as he wondered where Zen could have gotten any heavenly essence. "I have 55 droplets of essence in this cup," replied Zen. Taking a deep, calming breath, Worth said, "Well, that explains why you were so hesitant. In your shoes, I would be even more cautious." Zen chuckled and told him, "Well, I wouldn't if I only had the 1 cup of heavenly essence. I can offer you this much heavenly essence spread out over intervals of time. Please, Worth, help me sell it at auction." "Wait, what are you saying? Spread out over intervals? You mean, you have more than this?" asked Worth. He was shocked, and took a sharp breath of air, the chilliness hurting his nose. Heavenly essence was such a very mysterious substance that even now, nobody could figure out how it was produced. Even what they had sold at auction was unintentionally obtained by some warriors. What Zen was implying though was that he had more heavenly essence, and because it was such a large quantity, it needed to be sold over time. What did it all mean though? Chapter 180, Reputation. Evidently, this meant that Zen possessed heavenly essence in a large quantity. More importantly, he might have even known how to make the heavenly essence. Zen nodded. "Worth, I want to sell the heavenly essence through an auction at Blessed Auction House, which I have come to realize is a win-win situation for your family." "That sounds right." Zen laid down the incentives. Worth expressed his agreement with a rather enthusiastic nod. "By now you must have gotten a thorough understanding of my doubts. I fear that your family must be under great pressure if the heavenly essence is to be auctioned several more times. Can you handle that?" asked Zen. He tried to express his concerns. Worth took a deep and heavy sigh. Zen was right to worry and be concerned about that. After all, nothing in this world was certain and anything could happen under any circumstance. Even though Zhang family was strong in terms of both their political and financial standing, it was still inferior to the top 7 noble clans. It was normal and easy for the Zhang family to auction the heavenly essence once, because there had been other extremely lucky warriors who could get a hold of it. However, if the Zhang family were to auction heavenly essence every month, it would most certainly arouse suspicion and draw unnecessary attention. And all of this would mean only one thing. Either some clients of the Zhang family must have a large inventory of the heavenly essence, or they had the very method of producing it in mass. Once the noble clans chanced upon this significant development, they would put an enormous amount of pressure on the Zhang family. One way or another, the Zhang family would break under stress and confess as to how they came upon the heavenly essence. There was a risk there, no man could deny it. All of a sudden, Worth chuckled and then addressed Zen. "You are getting too worked up and stressed, Zen." This change in tone surprised Zen. After pausing for a moment, Zen said, "Can you do anything to avoid this pertinent risk? Can you control your family completely?" A smile appeared on Worth's face as he spoke. "Zen, you barely know my family. With that said, you have no idea of how my family deals with troubles or reacts under any circumstance. Our auction house has been handling business for many years and has always managed to work out solutions for all sorts of problems. You'd be surprised at what all we can handle. Many warriors shared your doubts and were reluctant to sell their treasures at our auction house. What's more, some warriors, after killing people and taking away their weapons, wanted to sell them. However, since those weapons were illegal possessions, they also didn't want to face troubles and bypass the law. We had to come up with some ideas to ensure that they remained safe while selling those illegally procured weapons at our premises. Killing owners and taking away treasures had become a common occurrence, reported almost every day and night. Even those young men from the noble clans could be robbed of their spiritual and mysterious weapons and get killed in broad daylight. Some spiritual weapons were taken away from others. Therefore, they couldn't be auctioned easily at the auction houses, as there always ran the risk of previous owners of those weapons finding clues or even traces indicating the robbers or even killer's identity. The Zhang family was clever and always managed to find alternative methods to solve problems and avoid the potential risks in this illegal business. Right before the auction, the treasures would be hidden at some secret spots, and the addresses to these places were written on a piece of paper by some third parties. Then, this piece of parchment would be sent across to a responsible man from the blessed auction house, who would pick the treasures. In this inconspicuous manner, the entire auction would be conducted without even shedding light on the owners or the purchasers of the treasures. Even employees of the blessed auction house didn't have a clue about who bought or sold the treasures. When the auction was safely carried out, the auction house would make a small charge. The collected cubic crystals would be stored in an unregistered token and sent to the sellers. Then the whole transaction ended. Worth explained this entire sequence to Zen and then added, "Please don't worry. I'll tell my family to ensure the entire transaction to be carried out in this way. That way, your identity will remain unknown to everybody but me. In fact, no one will ever know you're involved." Zen took a deep breath as he replied, "I understand." All this while he was concerned about how to hide his identity and sell the heavenly essence secretly. Now Worth had worked out a clear path out of the transaction. Besides, the blessed auction house had been doing this for so many years that the seller's interest was a matter of the utmost importance and would be protected. "But, I will ask you again, are you sure you want me to sell the 55 drops of heavenly essence for you?" Worth tried to crack a sly joke without even smiling. "Haha, those cubic crystals may be a big fortune for other people, but not you, the third son of the powerful and wealthy Zhang family. I have confidence in you, my friend," said Zen. Worth had a big picture in his mind and wouldn't sacrifice his long-term goals for some short-sighted profits. Besides, Zen told him that he had already taken possession of more heavenly essence than these drops. Worth would be a fool to illegally grab those 55 drops of heavenly essence and give up more of them. He knew for sure that if he really did that, Zen would not sell any more heavenly essences to him. Besides, Zen would get extremely annoyed. Worth couldn't stay at the Drizzle Peak and had to guard carefully against Zen. His sacrifices would mean much more than 500,000 of cubic crystals. Worth took the heavenly essences from Zen and delicately stuffed them into a beautiful emerald ring which was carefully on the ring finger of his left hand. It was a space ring. When it was done, Worth sighed and spoke out, "There will be an uproar if so many heavenly essences are sold in the imperial capital." Heavenly essence was precious and immensely valuable because it could be applied to the weapons directly. For example, a top-grade spiritual weapon could have qualitative changes if enough heavenly essences were applied to it. There was even a possibility of producing a fairy weapon from it. Although considerable time and effort was required and lots of heavenly essences were consumed, the fairy weapon deserved it. Its holder would make huge profits even after the making costs were taken into account. That explained why the heavenly essence was so valuable. Worth stopped practicing his martial arts and took off his heavy load suit. They returned to the main peak where they were to meet Sean and Nori. "Zen and Worth, I was looking for you," said Nori. He flashed a warm smile at them. "What's up?" asked Zen. He felt confused. Worth patted Zen on his shoulder as he smiled. "Oh so, have you forgotten? A few days ago Nori very clearly mentioned that a party would be held among his clan men. He invited us to this party," Worth replied. Zen came from a humble clan which was even inferior to Mo clan. Therefore, he had very little knowledge about the great noble clans, their conventions or even norms. However, Worth had a better understanding of everything, and simply sympathized with Nori who felt helpless and sad living under the burden of a noble clan's name. "I have been quite busy recently and almost forgot about this gathering. I must apologize. Will the party be held today?" asked Zen. Nori nodded and answered, "Yes, today is the day." They had made a promise to attend the party. So, they followed Nori and went to his house. The Mo clan, living in the northern part of the city, was commonly considered a declining one among the other clans of various sizes. The hereditary system, in place, ensured that the descendants of a declining family could still hold on to the same title or rank despite the circumstance. However, despite all of this, some clans remained unlucky, and disappeared completely. For instance, once upon a time there was a powerful noble clan called Shao clan. Although it wasn't among the most ancient clans, in fact it was actually better and more powerful than the 7 noble clans, since a galaxy of talents came from its descendants. This great clan held important posts both in the Imperial Army and in the Burning Sky Empire. Besides, some of them were even unprecedented masters of martial arts. Once it became powerful and influential, their ambition too began to swell. Their people were busy in expanding the territory, contending for power and profits. There was a time when nobody could challenge them both in and out of the court. Even members from the 7 noble clans had to bow and show their respect to this expanding and powerful clan. However, sooner than later the circumstances changed and the Shao clan was accused of conspiring against the royal family, which changed their fate forever. The whole Shao clan was destroyed and almost all of its people were executed within days of the accusation. Despite a few people surviving, the Shao clan could never recover from the disaster. The blow was too strong. This tragedy served as a warning for everybody to whom privileges and power of noble clans were given by the emperor. He could withdraw these opportunities as fast as he had granted them when the situation arose. The Mo family in the northern part of the city too had declined rapidly in the recent years, and no talents had come from this family. They would be deprived of their privileges and titles very soon if their situation didn't improve or they didn't find other powerful noble clans to live on. A broad street stretched out in the northern part of the imperial capital, and at the end of it stood a tall door almost 10 meters high. The gigantic door was painted red. 2 giant bronze lions were lying on their stomachs while appearing threatening and dangerous. Those regular citizens living in the imperial capital could only imagine how wealthy those noble clans were. Even the declining clans were beyond their reach. Nori took Zen, Worth and Sean through this grand door to the other world of cheer and luxurious indulgences. The Mo family's mansion was spotlessly clean and was permeated with a jubilant atmosphere owing to the party and the never-ending line of arriving guests. 4 carp lanterns hung on the door. The bronze had been cleansed. A butler and 2 servants were standing before the gate, welcoming guests courteously. The butler had been repeating the same action of smiling and bowing for several hours with unwavering enthusiasm. All of the guests were respected and esteemed members of the society. The butler had to make sure that they were satisfied with the service. So, he worked hard to please everyone. The smile on his face was professional and his manners were perfect. However, when he saw Nori and his group, his behavior suddenly changed. His fake smile disappeared, and instead he wore an arrogant and scornful look. "Young master, why are you back?" Nori too evidently never liked this butler. Since his mother died, this mansion was no longer his home. In response to the butler's cold question, Nori answered, "What's wrong? So are you telling me that I shouldn't come back home today?" The butler shook his head and responded, "You really misunderstood what I was saying. However, you're an outer disciple of the Cloud sect now. Whether you come back home or not isn't important anymore." "Ha ha," the butler chuckled nervously. The butler emphasized on the words, outer disciple. He actually meant that even though the Mo family was declining, they still didn't think highly of any outer disciple of the Cloud sect or care. Besides, he warned that Nori would be a big fool to think that his position at the Mo family had changed even the slightest bit.